Romantic Tales. Chapter 56. After listening to Yi Ying's words, Wang Shi's face turned ugly. If Yi Ying didn't have the right to manage the mansion, then her position as princess consortly was just a decoration. For the first time, Wang Shi regretted that she spoiled and indulged her daughter too much. If she had taught her more, she wouldn't have encountered such a problem. But Wang Shi didn't understand. Compared to virtuous consort Zhao, even if she went herself, it would be useless, let alone teaching more. From the beginning, Yi Ying was destined not to get the rights that a mistress of the mansion should have. Then, what does princely mean? Wang Shi pulled Yi Ying and asked. Yi Ying said with tears, Prince said that consort Zhao took pity on me because I was young, so she helped me manage the mansion. It won't be too late to take over after 2 years when I have a child and have learned enough. Wang Shi had a flash of inspiration. Right, child? Prince is right. Ying, you should give birth to the eldest son for Prince as soon as possible. You have to remember it's the eldest son. You can't let those women give birth to Prince Li's child before you. Yi Ying was shocked and looked at Wang Shi hesitantly. Wang Shi said softly, Good child, don't be afraid. I will tell you what to do. You are Prince Li's wife, so it's natural for you to give birth to a son for Prince Li. So those women can't get pregnant before you. Do you understand? Looking at the cold light in Wang Shi's eyes, Yi Ying nodded quickly. Wang Shi smiled with satisfaction and pulled Yi Ying to sit down and talk in detail. The mother and daughter, one was teaching and the other was learning. Just when they were talking, the servant outside the door came to report that the master was here. Wang Shi was overjoyed and pulled Yi Ying with a smile. Look, your father still cares about you. She quickly pulled Yi Ying up to greet Minister Yi. When Minister Yi came in and saw Yi Ying, he was startled at first and then said, Ying, why are you here? Yi Ying lowered her head bitterly and said, Ying is back, so I'm here to talk to mother. Where does father think I am? Minister Yi frowned slightly and couldn't help but look at Yi Ying. He felt that his daughter seemed to be a little different after not seeing her for a few days. But soon he concluded that she was a married daughter who had grown up, so he didn't ask any more questions. After Minister Yi sat down and served tea, Wang asked, Master, why are you here at this time instead of accompanying Duke Hua and Old Master Su? Minister Yi said, Old Duke and Old Lord Su went back after the banquet. I came to discuss with you about Li's dowry. Wang Shi had a bad premonition in her heart. Li's dowry? Wasn't it already prepared? Is there any other problem, Master? Minister Yi nodded. He glanced at Yi Ying, who was sitting at the side, and said, I've discussed with my mother. We'll add 2 more manors, 1 courtyard, 2 shops and 8,000 taels of silver to Li's dowry. What? Wang Shi screamed and almost knocked over the teacup in front of her. Yi Ying also looked at Minister Yi in disbelief. Minister Yi frowned with dissatisfaction and said, This is what the old lady wants. Wang tried her best not to scream. She looked at Minister Yi with red eyes and asked, Why? You and Ying were also master's legitimate daughters and old madam's biological granddaughters. The old madam was being a little too biased. It's fine if you is in the palace, but how can Ying stand in the Li palace in the future? Minister Yi said impatiently, What nonsense are you talking about? You know clearly what happened to Ying's dowry. How much did you put in? Do you think old madam and I don't know? Wang Shi said softly with some unwillingness, Didn't Li put in anything else? When eldest young lady got married, her dowry was not even a fraction of hers. Minister Yi said coldly, Don't you know where the dowry that Li's mother left for Zhen'er went? Also, the extra part of Li's dowry was left by her mother. It's from the Su family. The extra part of Ying's dowry is from the Yi family. Master. Wang Shi looked at Minister Yi with a sorrowful face. Her body was also on the verge of collapsing. I knew it. Master, you have always looked down on me. Just because my family was born in a humble family and was not as noble as my sisters. Before she could finish, Wang Shi was already in tears. Sob. If I had known earlier, I would have implicated my daughter and caused her to be despised by the old master. But I would have been better off dead. What nonsense are you talking about? Looking at his wife's sorrowful appearance, Minister Ye's heart softened. Thinking that he had been neglecting her for Zhao's sake these days, he said helplessly. Wang Shi had tears in her eyes and looked at Minister Yi sadly. Did Master not look down on me? Minister Yi said, All right, don't think too much. When did I look down on you? Only then did Wang Shi stop crying and looked at Minister Yi emotionally. By knows that master will always be good to buy her. Minister Yi looked at Yi Ying and made an uneasy sound of agreement. Yi Ying, who was sitting on the side, was also thoughtful. She was still very surprised by her mother's means of winning over her father. Although she felt that it was unbearable for her mother to act like a shy young girl, it was obvious that her father liked it. She also remembered the first madam. It could be said that Yi Ying had been working hard for a woman like the first madam since she was a child. So she actually didn't quite understand why her father would give up such a beautiful and elegant woman like the first madam and favor her mother more. For a time she even doubted whether she was really working hard in the wrong direction. But after growing up, the praise of the noble ladies in the capital and the admiring eyes of men made her understand that she was not wrong. Master, then, Li Er's dowry. Minister Yi frowned and said, "This is the old madam's decision. If you still have any opinions, you can talk to the old madam." Although Minister Yi was a little confused about his own private affairs, he was not too confused about business. He immediately pushed old Madam Yi out as a shield. Of course, Wang Shi didn't dare to ask old Madam Yi. If she dared to challenge old Madam Yi, she would have thought of a way to poison that old woman who always looked at her with her nostrils and liked to criticize her. Seeing that his wife and daughter were aggrieved and didn't dare to speak, Minister Yi sighed and said, "You also know what the Prince Ding Mansion's dowry is like. Although there is the dowry left by Li Er's mother, outsiders can't see anything. But which noble family in the capital doesn't know the root of the matter? If there is any gossip, our Yi family can no longer live in the capital. If they were greedy for the rich dowry of the son-in-law's family but couldn't give the corresponding dowry, they would be poked at by others." Wang Shi thought of the long list of dowry from the Prince Ding Mansion and had to admit that even if the Ding Mansion had declined, it was still a big family with a rich family background. If this matter is spread out, the Ding Mansion and Li Er will not be embarrassed. It's our Yi family and Zhaoyi Nyang in the palace. Minister Yi continued. At the mention of Zhaoyi in the palace, Wang Shi's expression wavered. But when she thought of the tens of thousands of silvers that she had to give out, her heart ached again. After thinking for a while, she faintly said, "Master and old madam have considered it thoroughly. It's me who thought wrongly. Master, please don't take offense. Just do as master said. I don't have the mood to care about these things now." Chapter 57. When Minister Yi heard this, he looked at her in surprise. What happened to Ying?" Wang Shi pulled Yi Ying and told her everything that happened in Prince Li's mansion in detail. Hearing this, Minister Yi couldn't help but get angry. Yi Ying might not see that concubine Xian Zhao deliberately wanted to take away her right to be the housekeeper, but how could Wang Shi and Minister Yi not see it? Who has ever heard of a new daughter-in-law being in charge of the household on the first day? And she directly concluded that Yi Ying was not suitable to be the housekeeper after 2 days? Even the harshest evil mother-in-law didn't do this. This is too much. I'll go to Prince Li and ask him to give my Yi family an explanation. Minister Yi said angrily. Yi Ying quickly pulled Minister Yi and didn't let him go. Minister Yi frowned and said, "Ying, what are you doing?" Yi Ying whispered, "Father, let's put this matter aside first. Prince has already promised the old concubine. Even if I say it now, it will only make the prince unhappy." After crying and with Wang Shi's consolation, Yi Ying was very clear that her only support now was Mo Jingli, so she must not make him unhappy. "Are we just going to let it go like this?" Minister Yi said. Comparing the gentle and polite Mo Xiuyao and the arrogant Mo Jingli, Minister Yi was even more dissatisfied with this son-in-law. Why did Prince Ding have such an identity and situation? Minister Yi thought with regret. Ying will think of a way. If it still doesn't work, I'll ask father to make the decision. Minister Yi sighed softly and said to his daughter with pity, "Well, although Prince Li is the son of the Empress Dowager, we don't have to be so afraid of him. The Emperor is not an unreasonable person. If it really doesn't work, we'll ask the Emperor to make the decision. Go back and prepare some silver for Ying." "Yes, I thank Master on behalf of Ying." Mo Xiuyao's guess was not wrong. Less than 2 days after the betrothal gifts were sent, someone from the palace came to pass Yi Zhaoyi's decree, saying that she missed the third miss and invited the third miss to the palace to meet her. Yi Li knew very well who wanted to see her. When Yi was at home, her relationship with her was not so bad that everyone knew about it, but it was definitely not better than her relationship with Yi Ying. Unfortunately, although Yili was only a Jowie, she had not officially become Princess Ding. Yili had no right to refuse her. Therefore she had no choice but to accept the decree and return to her courtyard to change into a decent set of clothes. Then she brought Qing Wan and Qing Yu with her and followed the eunuch who came to deliver the message into the palace. The Chu capital was located in the north of Dechu state. Most of the palaces there were lofty and majestic. As soon as they got off the carriage, they were greeted by the majestic aura of the royal family. Unlike the elaborate decorations of ordinary nobles, the imperial city was more prominent in its grandeur and majesty. The five-clawed golden dragon on the huge stone pillar seemed to be warning the world that imperial power was inviolable. Those who came here for the first time would definitely be awed by its magnificence. But Yili, who had long been accustomed to seeing 100-foot-tall buildings, scenic spots and historical sites, could only give it faint praise. After getting off the carriage at the gate of the palace, Yili followed the eunuch who led the way and entered the inner palace. While walking, she looked at the environment of the palace without leaving a trace and memorized her location. After passing through layers of palace gates, she finally stopped in front of a gorgeous palace. Yili looked up Yaohua Palace. Yili remembered that Yi Yu was granted to live in Yaohua Palace. "Third Miss Yi, please wait for a moment. I'll go in and report," the eunuch who led the way said in a sharp voice. Yili nodded and said, "Eunuch, please go ahead." After the eunuch went in to report, he did not come out quickly. Yili stood there for nearly an incense stick's worth of time, but no one came out. Qing Yu whispered, "Miss, what does Zhao Yang mean by this?" Qing Wan reprimanded in a low voice, "Don't talk too much. Miss didn't say anything, why are you talking too much?" Qing Yu also understood that the imperial palace was not a place where one could talk at will at home. She blinked her eyes in shame and kept silent. Yili said with a smile, "Don't be impatient." Qing Wan hesitated for a moment, looked around and whispered, "Miss, could it be that Zhao Yang?" Yili shook her head and said with a smile, "Zhao Yang will not use such a dirty method." Qing Yu and Qing Wan were both very intelligent. After hearing Yili's words, they immediately understood. They shut their mouths and stopped talking. Wasn't it just standing there and waiting? One of them was a martial artist, and the other had studied medicine since childhood. Neither of them was a weak person. After another quarter of an hour, no one came out of Yaohua Palace. Instead, a group of people came over shakily not far away. Looking at the extravagance, it must be a noble coming out. Yili and the other two stepped aside to avoid bumping into the other party. Soon the group of people had walked to the gate of Yaohua Palace. A group of palace maids and eunuchs surrounded two women in palace attire. They stopped not far from Yili. One of the women in blue looked at Yili curiously and said, "Hey? This miss looks unfamiliar. Why are you standing here?" Yili had to step forward and bow. Yili, the third daughter of the Ministry of Revenue, greets the two noble ladies. It turned out to be the future Princess Ding. "We don't dare to accept it." The woman in pink quickly moved aside and covered her mouth to laugh. "Third Miss Yi, why are you standing here? Are you here to visit Zhao Yang?" Yili nodded and smiled. "It is Zhao Yang's order to have an audience." "In that case, let's go in together." The woman in blue pulled Yili. Yili smiled and said, Yili entered the palace for the first time and didn't know the rules. "I didn't dare to enter without being summoned by Zhao. I won't waste the two noble ladies' time." "Yili, thanks again." The two women looked at each other. The woman in pink smiled and said, "In that case, let's go in first. Sister Zhao is pregnant now and easily tired. She must have fallen asleep and the people below don't dare to disturb her. Third Miss Yi, please wait a moment." "Thank you. Miss, why don't we go in with them?" Qing Yu asked softly. She didn't know if it was her illusion, but there seemed to be more people passing by on this road than when they first came. Yili looked back at her and asked with a smile, "Do you think we will be driven out if we go in?" "It shouldn't be, right?" Qing Yu said with some uncertainty. Yi family's miss was driven out. Her miss would lose face, but Zhao Yang wouldn't be any better. Over here. Yili looked back and saw a small head under a flowering tree in the corner of the hall not far away. The head was smiling and waving at her. Yili looked around and then raised her hand to point at herself. The child, whose body was half hidden in the flowering tree, nodded at her. "Come here, miss." Yili waved her hand and slowly walked over. "You are Prince Ding's uncle's future princess?" There was a delicate and cute little girl squatting in the bushes. She was about 7 or 8 years old and had a cute bun on her head. There were 2 strings of sparkling pearls in the bun. Her exquisite clothes were embroidered with golden phoenix patterns. It was obvious that this child's identity was not ordinary. Who are you? I won't tell you. The little girl opened her big bright eyes and looked at her with a smile. Chapter 58. Yili did not mind. Smiling, she asked, "Then do you know Prince Ding? Have you met him? Lying is not a good child. Everyone knows that Prince Ding has not left home for many years. He is probably as old as you are." The young girl gave her a look of disdain. "If I haven't met him, why can't I hear it from others? Cousin Xiangxiang told me that Uncle Prince Ding is the best martial artist in the world. He is the smartest, the most handsome, and the most powerful person. When I grow up, I want to marry him." Cousin Xiangxiang? Seeing the earnest expression on the young girl's face, Yili could not help but want to laugh. However, she did not want to attack the young girl's fragile heart. "Do you know how old Prince Ding is? By the time you grow up, he will be old. At that time, there will be someone with higher martial arts than him, smarter than him, and better looking than him. At that time, he will no longer be the most powerful person. What are you going to do?" The young girl was at a loss. Then what should I do?" "No, you are lying to me. You are the one who wants to marry Uncle Prince Ding. That is why you are lying to me." "I'm not lying to you. You see, I am much older than you right now, right? You can only marry when you are as old as me. At that time I will also be old. Prince Ding is older than both of us." The young girl sighed resentfully. "When the time comes, Uncle Prince Ding will definitely be older than maternal grandfather. If I marry him, I will definitely be laughed at by eldest imperial sister. Fine, Uncle Prince Ding will be yours." Yili held back her laughter. Nodding her head, she sincerely replied, "Okay. Thank you, Your Imperial Highness." "How do you know that I am a princess?" Yili blinked her eyes. "Not only do I know that you are a princess, I also know which princess you are." "I don't believe you. You have never seen this princess." Yili smiled and said, "I am guessing that you are the Empress daughter, Princess Changel, right?" The young princess tilted her head and sized up Yili for a while before nodding her head. "Fine, I agree with Cousin Xiangxiang's words. You are indeed very intelligent. This princess reluctantly accepts you as a friend." Looking at the little girl trying her best to act like an adult and a princess, Yili smiled and said, "Okay, thank you for your appreciation, Your Highness. Why is the princess here?" He pointed at the flowering tree where the little princess was hiding. Princess Changel unconcernedly twisted her body, continuing to hide in the thicket. This princess has heard that the Yi family produces beauties. Yi Jiaoyi and Yi Ying, who was about to be blown away by the wind, were famous beauties. So this princess came to see if the Yi family is really full of beauties. Now this princess admits that you are more pleasing to the eye than Yi Jiaoyi and Yi Ying. She could barely be considered a beauty. I'm guessing you'll have to wait for a long time. How about it? Why don't you come and play with this princess?" Yili was puzzled. "How do you know that it'll take a long time?" Princess Changel curled her small lips. "My Empress mother said that the women in the palace are all idle and have nothing to do. As a result, they strive to find work for others. If someone is not pleasing to the eye, they will have her wait a bit longer when paying respects. Kneeling a bit longer is something that these women love to do the most. However, you can be at ease. My Empress mother will not do such a thing." Yili smiled but did not speak. Princess Changel glared at her in dissatisfaction. "Are you going to go out and play with me or not?" Yili helplessly shook her head. "I still have to wait for Yi Jiaoyi to summon me. You know that if she can't find me when she wants to see me, it will be very troublesome. Also, someone's coming." Princess Changel glanced outside and immediately withdrew her small head. "Noble consort Lu has arrived. Don't say that you've seen me. He hates you the most." Yili nodded her head, helping her restore the flowering tree to its original state. "I understand. Quickly return. Don't make her Imperial Majesty worry." After restoring the thicket, Yili stood up and walked back to where Qinghuan and Qingyu were standing, waiting for the arrival of an even grander procession. From a distance, one could smell the faint fragrance of flowers. Escorted by groups of palace maids and eunuchs was a woman wearing a goose-yellow palace dress embroidered with hibiscus and phoenix. Her graceful figure was wrapped in the fitting palace dress, revealing her graceful curves. Her snow-white skin was picturesque and her cherry lips were slightly curved. Her appearance was 70% charming and 30% cold. These days Yili had seen many beautiful women. Qin Zheng was as elegant as an orchid, Hua Tianxiang was as graceful as a peony, Princess Xixia was as gorgeous as a peach blossom, and this noble consort Lu was as beautiful as a pear blossom, pure white and charming. Although she appeared delicate, she carried a trace of unattainable coldness. "You're Yili?" Noble consort Lu stopped in front of Yili and asked indifferently. "This subject is indeed noble consort Lu." "Greetings, noble consort Lu." Yili curtsied slightly. Noble consort Lu's delicate eyebrows slightly raised. "You shouldn't have entered the palace before, right? How do you know who I am?" Yili slightly smiled and said, "A few years ago the emperor worshipped the heavens. I was lucky enough to see your face, so I still remember." Noble consort Lu was slightly stunned and said with a sigh, "That should be 5 or 6 years ago, right? It's amazing that you can remember at such a young age." "Your Highness is so beautiful that it's unforgettable," Yili said with a smile. "You are more likable than your second sister. Why are you standing here? Go in with Yi Jiaoyi must have fallen asleep." She actually left the future Princess Ding at the gate of the palace. Noble consort Lu said indifferently, but her tone showed that she couldn't refuse. Yili paused for a moment and slightly curtsied. She said, "Then please go in first." In Yaohua Palace, when Yiyu saw Yili coming in with noble consort Lu, she couldn't help but be stunned. Noble consort Lu looked at her indifferently. "Sister saw third Miss Yi waiting outside the door, so I invited her in. Sister, you won't blame me for being nosy, right?" Although she said so, noble consort Lu didn't look like she was afraid that she would be offended. Yiyu pulled the corner of her mouth and said with a forced smile, "Sister noble consort, you must be joking. It's all my fault that I'm always listless these days and always forget things. If sister didn't bring third sister in, third sister would have been wronged for a long time. It's all because of you servants. Why didn't you remind I?" Her charming phoenix eyes glanced at the palace maids and eunuchs. Suddenly the palace was full of begging. Noble consort Lu frowned impatiently and said, "That's enough, sister. Forget it if you forgot. Why bother the servants? I don't think third Miss Yi will blame you. Isn't that right?" Yili had to follow her words. She said, "Noble consort Lu, you must be joking. I just waited for a while. There's nothing to be offended about." Yiyu's face relaxed. She pulled Yili to sit in front of her and said with a smile, "Third sister doesn't like to go out. I haven't seen third sister since I came to the palace. Now I finally see you. I haven't seen third sister for 1 or 2 years. Third sister has become more and more outstanding. How is your family?" Yili answered one by one. Yiyu kept asking Yili about some trivial things and Yili just answered respectfully. The strange thing was that noble consort Lu seemed to be completely unaware of the meeting between sisters and family members. He just sat there and listened. There was no place for her to interrupt, but she didn't care. She just sat there with a cold smile. Yiyu seemed to be used to noble consort Lu's behavior. She didn't ask her to leave or take Yili away. Chapter 59. I can't go to my fourth sister's wedding. How is she and Prince Li? Yili asked Yiyu with a smile while stroking her slightly protruding belly. Yili remembered Yi Ying's gloomy face when she returned home 2 days ago. It was really not good. But now she didn't intend to say it to make Yiyu feel uncomfortable. She just said with a smile, "Fourth sister and Prince Li are newly married. Of course they are good. But I'm a little busy now. I didn't have time to talk to you." Yiyu already knew that Yi Li and Yi Ying's relationship was not good, so she didn't care. She just took Yi Li's hand and said with a smile, "We are sisters. After marriage we don't have to see each other all the time at home. It's not a bad idea to walk around more. I can't do anything in the palace. You sisters can take care of each other outside. So father and grandmother don't worry. Don't you think so?" Yili nodded and said, "You're right." The 2 sisters were talking about Yi Mansion when a servant came in and said that Empress Dowager wanted to see third Miss Yi. Yi was stunned for a moment. Then she turned to Yili and said with a smile, "Since Empress Dowager wants to see you, third sister, go quickly. Empress Dowager is the ruler of the world. She loves the younger generation the most. Third sister, don't be afraid. It's not convenient for me to go with you." Yili nodded. She looked at Yu's well-maintained jade fingers and gently stroked her abdomen. She nodded faintly and said, "Thank you for your advice, Your Highness. Since this is the case, I will take my leave." Yu smiled and said, "Third sister, take care. Servants, escort third miss out for me. Sister, I also want to pay respect to Empress Dowager. You can go with third miss Yi." Noble consort Lu stood up and said. Yu nodded. "In this case, I'll have to trouble sister noble consort." Noble consort Lu nodded lightly. "Third miss, let's go." Yili followed noble consort Lu out of Yaohua Palace. She looked back at the richly decorated palace gate. When Yu said that Empress Dowager wanted to see her, if she didn't see wrong, Yu was nervous. As for noble consort Lu, she took a look at noble consort Lu, who was walking in the front with her entourage. Until now, she still couldn't tell whether noble consort Lu was a friend or a foe. Accompanying her into Yaohua Palace, and then accompanying her to see the Empress Dowager? Yili was sure that if noble consort Lu hadn't been sitting there the whole time, Yi would have said more than that. But Yili couldn't believe that noble consort Lu was good to her, not to mention that they had never met each other before. She didn't even bother to hide her contempt under her faint arrogance. Helplessly shrugging, Yili calmly followed behind. The people in the palace were really troublesome. The palace where the Empress Dowager lived was located in the northwest part of the imperial city. Its area was twice the size of Yaohua Palace, and the splendid pavilions and palaces revealed the noble status of the emperor's birth mother. Zhangde Palace was specially built for the Empress Dowager after the emperor ascended the throne. Standing in front of Zhangde Palace and waiting for the summons, noble consort Lu looked back at Yili and said lightly, "Also, don't listen to your sister's nonsense. The Empress Dowager isn't a good-tempered person. Be careful." Yili pursed her lips and said with a faint smile, "Thank you for your advice." Noble consort Lu snorted, flicked her sleeves and stepped into Zhangde Palace first. Yili followed behind. Although her face was calm, her mind had already turned hundreds of times. Although she hadn't been in the palace for long, the strangeness of the imperial palace was beyond her understanding. It was said that the Empress Dowager helped the emperor ascend the throne. The Empress Dowager was a famous virtuous concubine. But noble consort Lu, as the emperor's favorite concubine, didn't respect the Empress Dowager at all. She looked up at the three large characters on the horizontal board under the eaves. Zhangde, she hoped the emperor was willing to write it. Yili greets the emperor, greets the Empress Dowager. Walking into the hall and seeing the tall man in a bright yellow robe, Yili's face flashed with a trace of surprise, but she quickly bowed respectfully. "Rise. Chang'er, why are you here?" Mo Jingqi glanced at Yili, then his eyes fell on noble consort Lu. He stood up and walked down the stairs to pull noble consort Lu in front of him. Noble consort Lu snorted and said lightly, "What? Does the emperor feel that I can't greet the Empress Dowager?" Mo Jingqi sighed and said softly, "You know I'm not like this. Your Majesty." A voice with a trace of sternness and displeasure came from the hall. Yili glanced at it secretly. The Empress Dowager must have been a great beauty when she was young. Although she was the elder sister of consort Xianzhao, the Empress Dowager looked younger than consort Xianzhao. Her phoenix eyes gave people an indescribable sense of sharpness, but Yili knew that her eyes must have been enchanting and beautiful when she was young. At this time, the Empress Dowager didn't notice Yili, but cast her sharp eyes on noble consort Lu. She could even feel a trace of murderous intent in her eyes. Obviously, the Empress Dowager didn't like noble consort Lu very much. "Mother." Mo Jingqi frowned and took noble consort Lu to the hall, saying, "Mother Chang'er came to greet you. She must have met third Miss Yi and came together." The Empress Dowager said lightly, "Greet? It's rare for noble consort Lu to remember to greet me today. Mother, you know that Chang'er's health hasn't been good since she gave birth to Jing'er." Mo Jingqi looked a little embarrassed, but he still firmly protected noble consort Lu by his side. Peeking at the Empress Dowager's gloomy face, Yili wanted to sympathize with her. She finally gave birth to 2 sons. After the late emperor died, Empress Yuan became the empress. She worked hard to send her sons to the throne. She should be happy as the Empress Dowager, who knew that the youngest son was occasionally stupid, and the eldest son of the emperor only cared about his wife and not his mother. "Mother, didn't you say you wanted to see third Miss Yi? Let's see how Xuyao's princess is first." Seeing the Empress Dowager's face was really bad, Jingqi hurriedly said. Yili was speechless. Your Majesty, are you trying to divert the trouble away? As expected, the Empress Dowager quickly turned her eyes back to Yili. Yili silently decided that it was better to believe noble consort Lu's words. Just the Empress Dowager's gaze on her was not something an ordinary person could bear. You are Yili? After a long time the Empress Dowager asked. Yili respectfully lowered her eyes and answered, Your Majesty, I am Yili. The Empress Dowager frowned and said, Raise your head and let me have a look. Yili raised her head and let the Empress Dowager and the Emperor look at her. I have seen your mother several times in the past. The granddaughter of the Su family is really not someone who can't be seen in public. What a pity. The Empress Dowager didn't say anything about what a pity. Of course no one was tactful enough to ask. Yili's sharp eyes saw that noble consort Lu sitting next to the Emperor didn't look good. She had some doubts in her heart. The Empress Dowager shouldn't be scolding noble consort Lu indirectly. After all, the daughter of Prime Minister Lu was definitely not someone who could not be seen in public. My Li-er is not sensible. Miss Yi, please don't take what happened before to heart. The Empress Dowager's sharp eyes stared at Yi Li without blinking. Chapter 60. Yi Li smiled. Empress Dowager's words are too serious. This subject's daughter and Prince Li are not fated. Compared to not being able to see each other after the wedding, Prince Li bringing it up before the wedding is a good thing for myself and Yi Li. This subject's daughter is very grateful. What does Miss Yi think about Li-er's wedding? This is Prince Li's private matter. This subject's daughter should not make wild guesses. What if Aijia wants to hear your opinion? The Empress Dowager asked. This subject's daughter thinks that Prince Li was too excited about the wedding and did not rest well the night before? Yi Li smiled innocently and looked at the Empress Dowager with a hint of fear. Prince Li and fourth sister are in love. Who in the capital doesn't know? Finally, he is going to embrace the beauty. It's natural for Prince to be a little excited. Miss Yi, I heard that a few days ago, you said that Prince Li did not pay and asked for a lot of money? Noble consort Lu, who was sitting at the side, suddenly spoke with a smile. The temperature in the hall suddenly dropped. Yi Li blinked blankly, her face full of shame. This subject's daughter is not sensible. Please forgive me, Empress Dowager and Emperor. This subject's daughter. Ever since my late mother passed away, I rarely went out. The first time I took charge, I lost my sense of propriety. After that, grandmother also scolded this subject's daughter. This subject's daughter also had people return the money to the princely manor and apologize to Prince. But she was chased out along with the money. After that, Yi Li sent 200 taels to the housekeeper as compensation for the psychological damage. She peacefully kept the rest in her own purse. This was Jingli's fault to begin with. Even the royal family would not have the cheek to blame him. Seeing Yi Li's shocked and ashamed appearance, Jingqi lightly coughed and gave noble consort Lu a warning look. He comforted her. Forget it. This matter was Jingli's fault. It's not Miss Ye's fault. Imperial Mother also does not intend to blame you. Yi Li happily thanked. This subject's daughter thanks your Majesty for your magnanimity. The Empress Dowager calmly nodded. Forget it. This Aijia does not intend to blame you. Give Miss Yi a seat. 2 palace maids carried an embroidered stool and placed it behind Yi Li. Yi Li thanked them and then carefully sat on only 2/3 of the stool. She was not grateful to the Empress Dowager for giving her a seat. If she could choose, she would rather continue to stand. After sitting down, not only would the person who was already at the bottom become even shorter, it would also severely affect the person's vision. Moreover, the way a young lady from a noble family sat was even more strenuous than when she was young. At least she could still use her legs to support herself when she was in the horse stance. Sitting in such an elegant and dignified manner was not something that she had been trained to do since she was young. She could only pray that she would not fall off the stool. Miss Yi, is Mr. Qingyun well? Jingqi looked at Yi Li, his eyes filled with curiosity. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, Many thanks for the Emperor's concern. Uncle mentioned that grandfather's body is still quite healthy. Jingqi smiled. There's no need to be so nervous. Back then, we had also witnessed Mr. Qingyun's elegance and couldn't help but yearn for him. It's just that we haven't seen each other for many years. Yi Li lowered her head in shame. Ever since mother passed away, This subject's daughter hasn't seen grandfather for many years. This subject's daughter is truly unworthy of grandfather's love for her not being able to bring joy to mother's knees. Miss Yi and Prince Ding are getting married. Mr. Qingyun surely won't miss his only granddaughter's wedding? Grandfather is already old and can't bear the fatigue of traveling. I'm afraid he won't be able to see this subject's daughter with his own eyes. But grandfather has already sent eldest uncle to the capital to host the wedding. This subject's daughter is also very happy. Jingqi's eyes flashed slightly. Mr. Hongyu has already entered the capital? Eldest young master suit. Yili smiled calmly and said, big cousin and a few other cousins have also come to the capital. Uncle doesn't have any scholarly achievements, so there's no need to announce it. Jingqi laughed in a clear voice. The Su family has never liked fame and prefers peace and quiet. However, Mr. Hongyu can be considered my teacher. This time I didn't even greet him when he entered the capital. It's really a bit impolite. Yili hurriedly said she didn't dare, but in her heart she disagreed. Eldest uncle had only given him some advice on his studies under the late emperor's order. Who was his teacher? Besides, if he really wanted to greet him he would have done so long ago. She didn't believe that Jingqi really didn't know when eldest uncle entered the capital. Jingqi clearly didn't want to be entangled in this issue. He looked at Yili and said, Miss Yi won the first place in this year's 100 Flower Festival. Even Princess Ronghua praised Miss Yi several times in front of the Empress Dowager. I wonder if Miss Yi can let me and the Empress Dowager feast our eyes. He didn't give Yili a chance to refuse. With a wave of his hand, palace maids and eunuchs carried over a carved writing table. There were all kinds of brush, ink, paper and inkstone on the table. This subject's daughter will embarrass herself. Yili stood behind the writing table. As she drew, she cursed the emperor 100 times in her heart. She really couldn't understand why these ancient emperors liked to randomly grab people to write poems. After all, not everyone was fond of reciting poems and composing essays, and not everyone had the talent to do so. What if she was called by the emperor but couldn't write a poem? Yili drew a picture of an orchid in a well-behaved manner. She also mentioned a poem that her grandfather had written years ago. The only thing that could be called outstanding was her handwriting. Seeing the people's eyes change from curiosity to surprise and then to disappointment, Yili didn't care. She respectfully stood behind the writing table and waited for the emperor's evaluation. Orchid? This is Mr. Qingyun's poem? Noble consort Lu frowned and asked. Yili said shamefully, this subject's daughter is really not proficient in poetry. Please forgive me, Your Majesty. A bit of disdain flashed through noble consort Lu's eyes. She glanced at the painting and said, Miss Ye's handwriting is pretty good. It was rare for the Empress Dowager to agree with noble consort Lu's words. Yi Li's work from the 100 Flower Festival was in the palace. The painting wasn't amazing, it was just average. As for the poem, the three people in the hall all suspected that the peony poem that stunned the 100 Flower Festival wasn't Yi Li's work. After all, the Su family didn't have many things, but they had many talents. The person who could casually find a ghostwriter for Yi Li was definitely an important person. It wasn't strange for them to have a poem like that. Miss Ye's handwriting is really good. Yi Li could clearly feel that the three people's interest in her had decreased a lot. Even though she didn't understand why the ancient people thought that the four arts represented a person's intelligence, at least this result wasn't bad for her. It wasn't until the afternoon that Yi Li was sent out of the palace by the Empress Dowager. During this time she contributed her calligraphy to the Empress Dowager to copy a scroll of scriptures. Because no one thought of asking her to go to Yaohua Palace to say goodbye to Yi Jiaoyi, Yi Li didn't want to trouble the people sent by the Empress Dowager. She could only pretend that she had forgotten. Accompanied by the palace servants, she took the gifts from the emperor, the Empress Dowager, and noble consort Lu out of the imperial city. It wasn't until she got into the carriage that Yi Li slowly let out the breath that had been in her heart for most of the day. Miss, rest for a while. You don't look good. Qingyu reached out to feel Yi Li's pulse and said softly. Chapter 61. Qing Wan said helplessly, Miss, it's your first time entering the palace. You're a little nervous. Unfortunately, we can't enter the Empress Dowager's palace and we can't accompany you. Qingyu smiled and said, You can only scare yourself if you go in. Don't make trouble for Mississippi. Yi Li leaned against the carriage and closed her eyes to rest. At the same time she went through what happened in the palace today in her mind. When she was in the palace she could only be careful everywhere. She didn't have time to think about many things. The emperor, the empress dowager, noble consort Lu. Everyone seemed to be normal, but they seemed to hide some unknown tangled relationship. Yili suddenly opened her eyes. Qing Wan and Qing Yu were startled. Miss, what's wrong? The carriage is going the wrong way. Yili said. Before he could finish his words, a long arrow pierced through the carriage with a whoosh. In a remote alley somewhere in the capital, a carriage was parked quietly. The coachman who drove the carriage had already disappeared. Unknowingly, the carriage was surrounded by people. The man in the lead was wearing an inconspicuous gray dress. His long hair covered half of his face. The other half of his face looked stiff and ferocious. His only eye was emitting a bitter cold light. Even if the sun hadn't set yet, it still bloomed a touch of warmth. When it shone on the man it gave people a kind of bone-chilling coldness. Come out. The man's voice sounded gloomy. For a long time there was no movement in the carriage. As if waiting impatiently, the man sneered and said, If you don't come out I'll shoot the arrow. I know the people inside are not dead. Come out. A moment later, a delicate and pretty girl unsteadily lifted the curtain and slid down from the carriage. Then, together with another delicate and pretty girl, they helped a pale girl with a delicate and pretty face down. There was an arrow stuck in the girl's right shoulder, and the area that was covered by her left hand was already dark red. Who are you? The one-eyed man sneered. His ferocious eye flashed with a vicious light. This is the future princess of Prince Ding? That cripple Emo Xiao sure has a good life. He only has half a life left, but there's still such a beautiful woman willing to marry him. Qing Wan stood in front, protecting the two people behind her. Since you know who we are, how dare you be so rude? The one-eyed man sneered. Others might be afraid of Emo Xiao, but I'm not. What's more, is there anyone in the capital who is afraid of him? Yili looked straight at the man. Do you have a grudge against Prince Ding or the Su family or the Yi family? The one-eyed man stared blankly for a moment before laughing maniacally. Emo Xiao's woman? Interesting. I have no enmity with Emo Xiao, the Su family or the Yi family. What are you going to do about it? Yili said, So you've taken other people's benefits and now you're looking for trouble? How much did you get? I'll double it. You? The one-eyed man stared at Yili, as if he was evaluating the credibility of her words. I took 20,000 taels of silver from other people to take your life. Can you afford it? Yili nodded. If you let us go I'll give you 40,000 taels. Why should I believe you? The man's single eye shrank as he fiercely stared at Yili. No matter who it was, 40,000 taels of silver was definitely a number that could move people's hearts. The surrounding people's eyes also began to waver, but the one-eyed man didn't say anything, so they didn't dare to act rashly. Yili lightly said, If you don't believe me, you can let my maid go back and give you the money. One hand for the money and the other hand for the people, so we don't owe each other anything. Moreover, I don't think you want to kill me. I only ask that you don't hurt us. The one-eyed man's eyes fiercely twitched as he stared at Yili. You think that I don't dare to kill you? If you really want to kill me, just shoot us to death with arrows just now. Good, Emo Xiao's woman is really a bit different. Go back and get the money. If others know about it, or if you don't see the banknotes at the appointed place, then prepare to collect the corpse of your Mississippi. Qing Yu, who was pointed at, shook her head fiercely and said, I don't want to go. Let Miss go back, we'll stay. The one-eyed man sneered. Do you think that I will believe that the lives of two girls are valuable? Qing Yu gritted her teeth and said, My miss is injured. I know a little about medicine. Let Qing Wan go back. The injury is not serious. If you come quickly, you won't have time to heal your Mississippi. Get lost. Qing Yu, you go first. Yili softly said. Qing Yu bit the corner of her lips and nodded heavily. Qing Wan, take good care of Mississippi. Qing Wan nodded and turned around to help Qing Yu support Yili. Seeing Qing Yu stumbling out, the one-eyed man pointed at the two people beside him and said, Follow that girl and get the banknotes back. This for you. Do you want to go by yourself or do I ask someone to invite you to go? We'll go by ourselves. They were kidnapped. Yili looked at the situation in front of her helplessly. Of course, a group of bandits could kidnap a future princess from the capital. It had to be said that this was also a very magical thing. Moreover, the group of people moved out of the capital at a very fast speed and came to a steep mountain 100 miles away from the capital. Obviously, they were indeed kidnapped by bandits because this was a bandits' village. Perhaps because Yili was still worth 40,000 taels of silver, they were not thrown into the gloomy dungeon, but locked in a somewhat simple hut. When the door was closed, Qing Wan hurriedly walked to the door and listened to the movement outside. Then she walked to Yili and whispered, "Miss, we are so far away from the capital, can Qing Yu find us?" Yili put down the hand that had been pressing on her right shoulder and took the arrow off. The arrow entered from the right side of her chest and went in diagonally. It didn't hurt Yili at all. The red blood on her clothes was just the red rouge and a bottle of potion that Qing Yu carried with her. He didn't intend to let Qing Yu come back at all. He just didn't want to give up the 40,000 taels of silver. Qing Wan was shocked. "Miss, you mean, they planned to kill us after taking the money?" Yili nodded and comforted Qing Wan with a smile. "Don't worry, those two people are not Qing Yu's opponents. She will be fine." The worry on Qing Wan's face didn't disappear at all. She looked at her miss helplessly. She was not worried about Qing Yu. She was worried about how they could get out of danger. Master and eldest young master were comforted by them. Now that Miss was kidnapped by bandits, they could only be helpless. They were really useless. There are too many of them. "It's not your fault." Yili smiled and said, "Help me bandage my wound." Qing Wan nodded. She lowered her head and pulled a piece of cloth from the sleeve of the clean inner garment to bandage Yili's wound. She asked, "Miss, do you know who wants to harm us? Could it be Madam?" Yili shook her head and said, "She is short of money recently. It's unlikely that she would take out 20,000 taels of silver to kidnap me. And it's easy to find out." The most important thing was that the other party obviously didn't mean to kill her. Then either the other party was not afraid of her revenge or the other party was someone she would never think of, so there was no way to take revenge. Therefore it should not be Wang Shi. Chapter 62. Qing Wan frowned, but Miss didn't offend anyone. Yili was silent. They kidnapped her, but they didn't intend to take her life. Then, once the news of her being kidnapped by bandits spread out, her reputation would be ruined. Marriage? What? Someone doesn't want me and Prince Ding to get married smoothly, Yili said faintly. Li Wang. Qing Wan said hatefully. Yili shook her head, maybe but not necessarily. Mo Jingli should know that if something happened to her, the first person Mo Shuyao would look for would be him. Then what should we do now? Qing Wan, open the door and Miss can take the opportunity to escape. Yili shook her head. This place was at least 100 li away from the capital. If it was really for her and Prince Ding's marriage as she guessed, then the news of her being kidnapped would have spread out as soon as she left the capital. If she was alone, it might not be difficult to leave this stockade. But even if she went back now, it would be useless. Then it was better to stay. Maybe there would be some unexpected discoveries. Take a rest first. We'll talk later. Yes, Mississippi Ding Palace Prince. The head steward of the palace came in anxiously. Seeing Mo Xuyao's face, he didn't have time to salute and hurriedly said, Prince, something bad happened. Mo Xuyao suddenly raised his head. What happened? Just now, the people below came to report that there was a sudden rumor outside, saying that third Miss Yi was kidnapped by flower thieves. The sudden piercing gaze made the head steward's words stop abruptly. The head steward couldn't help but shiver. He looked at the man sitting in the wheelchair with some trepidation. Prince. Mo Xuyao closed his eyes and suddenly opened them, asking, what happened? This subordinate also doesn't know what happened. When the servants went out to buy things for the prince's wedding, they heard the news being spread all over the place. When he felt that something was wrong, he hurried back to report it to his subordinates. This subordinate does not dare to delay right now. Mo Xuyao raised his hand to interrupt him, saying, immediately send someone to the minister's manor to see if Li Li has returned. Another group of people is to immediately investigate Miss Li's whereabouts after she left the palace, as well as the situation in the palace. Yes, I'll go right away. The supervisor didn't dare to stay any longer. He turned around and quickly disappeared into the corridor. Jin, inform Feng San that no matter what method you use, I do not want to hear any more rumors in the capital, Mo Xuyao said indifferently in the quiet study, but the murderous intent in his voice made people tremble in fear. Yes, Prince. The steward who had just left appeared at the door. What is it? Eldest young master Su just sent someone to deliver an invitation, inviting Prince to quickly come to the Su residence for a chat. Mo Shuyao lowered his gaze. I understand. Su residence's residence in the main courtyard. Qing Yu sat powerlessly on a chair. The sleeve of her left arm was torn and half of her sleeve was dyed red with blood. The two men that the one-eyed man had sent to follow her were unconscious on the ground. Su Hongyu sat at the head of the table with a heavy expression. Below him sat Su Hongyan and Su Qingchen. Su Qingze and the others stood to the side, their expressions unsurprisingly ugly. How are the rumors outside? Su Hongyu asked in a heavy voice. Su Hongyan said, someone deliberately spread it. According to Qing Yu, it hasn't even been 2 hours since Lear was kidnapped, and the rumors have already spread throughout the capital. People have been sent to secretly search all over the capital. But I'm afraid Lear is no longer in the capital. Su Qingchen said with a frown. The dignified son of heaven actually allowed so many people to kidnap 2 weak women. What are the capital's guards doing? Su Qingfeng was furious. Su Qingchen frowned and said, we'll talk about this later. Can't these 2 people wake up? Qing Yu said, this servant has drugged them with agarwood intoxication. They should wake up in 15 minutes. She originally wanted to lure these 2 people back to the Su family, but she didn't expect that one of them would be so alert and see through her plan. In his anger he wanted to kill her to silence her. She helplessly spent a lot of effort and time to make these 2 people faint. Only then could she inform the eldest young master. But she didn't expect that in such a short time, the news of the young miss being kidnapped would spread throughout the capital. Since you can't wake them up, leave it to I. A faint voice came from the door. Everyone turned to look. Mo Shuyao was wearing plain clothes, sitting in a wheelchair with an indifferent expression as he stared at the 2 unconscious people on the ground. Behind him, the silent aide Jean pushed the wheelchair in. Prince. Everyone stood up. Mo Shuyao raised his hand. Business is more important. There's no need for formalities. Jean. Yes, Prince. Jean walked forward. With a flick of her right wrist, a thin long whip appeared in her hand. There were small barbs on the tip of the whip, shining coldly under the candlelight. Pa, the long whip viciously lashed at the unconscious body on the ground. With a tearing sound, the barbs on the whip tore off a piece of skin and flesh. While everyone was stunned, Jean mercilessly lashed out with the whip again. Pa. After 5 lashes, a painful groan came from the ground. One of the people was the first to open his eyes. What greeted him was a long whip that was like a poisonous snake. Ah. Pa. Save me. Spare me. Spare me. Mo Shuyao leaned against the wheelchair with an indifferent expression. Tell I, where are the people you kidnapped? No. I don't know. Prince, spare me. Prince, spare me. Pa. It hurts. No, Prince, spare me. I really don't know. I only want to know the whereabouts of the people you kidnapped. Tell me and I will spare your life. Looking down at the person on the ground, Mo Shuyao's expression was indifferent. The person under his gaze couldn't help but tremble. He moaned, I really don't know. Mo Shuyao nodded. I admire your backbone. I hope your backbone will allow you to live. The wheelchair slowly moved to the side of the person on the ground. That person endured the tearing pain in his body and stared at the person getting closer and closer to him. His eyes flashed with ecstasy. The moment Mo Shuyao approached him, he suddenly jumped up and pounced at him. But the person in the wheelchair was clearly faster. The moment the person was about to touch him, he slumped to the ground. Then Mo Shuyao used a strange technique to quickly point at various parts of the person's body. Then there was a series of bone-chilling kacha-kacha sounds accompanied by an incomparably mournful scream. The person who originally pounced over like a fierce tiger fell beside the wheelchair like a ball of rags. Mo Shuyao took the handkerchief Jean handed him and slowly wiped the right hand that had poked the person's body. He looked sideways at the other person on the ground. Now, are you willing to tell I the answer? Chapter 63. Everyone's eyes fell on the ragged body on the ground. It was really a ball of rags. The originally tall and slender man curled up into a ball at an extremely strange angle. It was as if all the bones in his body had disappeared in an instant. He was limp and lifeless on the ground. But what was even more frightening was that this person was still alive. the youngest, Su Qingyan, looked at the scene in front of him and couldn't help but shiver. He hid behind Su Qingfeng without leaving a trace. Now he didn't feel safe following fourth brother. Among the brothers, third brother's martial arts was the best. The person who was still unconscious began to tremble. Spare me. Prince, spare me. Where is the person you kidnapped? Emo Xiao asked. Not in the capital. Boss left the capital as soon as he caught the person. Where did he go? I really don't know. Boss said our stronghold was not safe, so he changed the place after doing the last job. I haven't been there. A tall man was so scared that he cried bitterly. Then tell me where you were. Outside the capital. 60 Black Cloud Peak. Prince, spare me. Give them to Feng San and see if he can get anything out of them. Go and prepare immediately. I want to leave the city. Yes. Ajin put away the whip and walked out with one person in each hand. The young man's slender and thin body didn't feel the slightest strain carrying two strong men twice his size. He walked out as if he was flying. In a simple room, Yili and Qing Wan were lying on the bed and sitting on a stool beside the bed with their eyes closed. Although her eyes were closed, Qing Wan's face still had a look of shame and uneasiness. She secretly opened her eyes and glanced at Yili, who was sitting on the bed and leaning against the wall. Qing Wan whispered, "Miss, lie down and rest for a while. Qing Wan will guard." Yili opened her eyes and looked at her. She smiled and said, "Rest for an hour. Tonight you must find a way to leave here." Qing Wan suddenly widened her eyes in surprise. "How can that be? Miss should be the one to leave first." Qing Wan knows that young Miss is not a weak woman without the strength to truss a chicken. Qing Wan will lead those people away for young Mississippi. Young Miss will definitely be able to break out by herself. Yili shook her head and said, "I will be fine even if you go out. If I don't see you, they will definitely kill you." "That won't do. I can't leave Miss alone," Qing Wan said stubbornly. Yili looked at her firmly. "When you go back, you can find someone to save me." Looking at their fearless look, "I'm afraid it's not easy to find the place where we are now." Qing Wan's mind was in a mess and she looked at Yili hesitantly. It seemed that listening to Mrs. orders was the right choice, but for some reason she felt uneasy. Yili smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm the miss, aren't I? Big brother asked all of you to listen to me. Are you going to disobey my orders?" "Miss." Qing Wan was at a loss and could only look at Yili with tears in her eyes. Yili looked at her and said softly, "Qing Wan, be good. You must leave here tonight. Perhaps after that, I will meet some unexpected people." "Miss." Qing Wan looked at Yili in horror. "Be good, don't be afraid. Miss, I can get myself out of this. Hurry up and go down the mountain to ask for help. You also want us to go home earlier, don't you?" Yili smiled and fooled her. Qing Wan finally nodded solemnly. Bang! The door of the room was kicked open from the outside. Qing Wan quickly jumped up from the bed and stood in front of Yili, staring vigilantly at the two burly men who suddenly broke in. "What do you want to do?" The first person stared at Yili, who was protected behind Qing Wan, with a lustful look and laughed. "Is this the third miss of the Yi family? The most talented woman in the capital this year, Prince Ding's fiancée?" The one who followed him was obviously a lackey. He smiled and said, "Second bandit chief is right. This is the miss brought back by the head bandit chief." The second bandit chief rubbed his hands and laughed evilly. "Big brother, what do you mean? Why are these two beautiful women locked up here?" The lackey was stunned and remembered what his boss told him. He quickly said, "Second bandit chief, you can't touch these two beauties." The second bandit chief snorted and said, "Who can't I touch in my ghost cloud mountain? This miss is worth a total of 60,000 taels of silver. The head bandit chief told us, especially Miss Yi, that we can't touch her. 60,000 taels of silver?" The second bandit chief's eyes lit up with greed. His gaze fell on Yili and then returned to Qing Wan. He smiled and said, "Well, for the sake of 60,000 taels of silver, I will let her go first. Then this girl belongs to this fort master. Although she is not as beautiful as that one, she is much better than those ugly people in the village." As he said, he pounced on Qing Wan. "Qing Wan, do it." Yili suddenly got up and quickly bypassed Qing Wan and the second bandit chief who pounced on her. She directly knocked out the lackey standing behind. Qing Wan did not delay. Her seemingly petite body seemed to have infinite strength. She punched the man's abdomen, then nimbly turned over and landed behind him. She raised her hand and chopped the back of his neck. The tall and strong man immediately fell to the ground. He did not even make a sound. Yili had quickly closed the door behind her. Mississippi. Yili nodded with appreciation. The little girl had good potential. Hey, don't delay. Do you remember the way down the mountain? Qing Wan roughly recalled and nodded. When they went up the mountain, although the bandits covered their eyes, they ignored that Qing Wan was a martial artist and her hearing was extraordinary. Although she could not completely remember, she should still remember the general direction. Yili said, I guess this village is newly built. Whether it's the mechanism or the defense, it won't be too strong. Should be careful. Sco. Miss, be careful. Yili nodded and repeatedly assured him that she would be safe. After sending Qing Wan away, she looked back at the two people who were still lying on the ground. She bent over and took out the hairpin on her head and pierced some inconspicuous acupoints on their bodies a few times. Only then did he sit back on the bed and close his eyes to rest. Yili sat quietly on the bed, but her ears were focused on listening to the movements outside. The village was quiet at night. Apparently, Qing Wan was not discovered by anyone. Yili heaved a sigh of relief. Someone who could successfully follow Mr. Feng Yu should be trustworthy, right? As long as they were not discovered within an hour was enough for Qing Wan to leave this kind of ghost cloud or returning cloud mountain. Bang! The simple door was kicked open from the outside again, and the door began to sway with difficulty due to the unbearable weight. The one-eyed man rushed in first. When he saw the people on the ground and Yili sitting peacefully on the bed, he was stunned. Unexpectedly, he didn't get angry. Instead, he waved his hand and called for a few people to carry the people on the ground out. Chapter 64. It seems that I still underestimated you. Where's that girl? The one-eyed man stared at Yili and asked. Yili sighed helplessly in her heart. She was discovered in advance. She hoped that Qing Wan could go down the mountain safely. Didn't you see it? She escaped. The ferocious one-eyed man squinted suspiciously and stared at her. Why didn't you go with her? Or did that girl betray her master and escape? It's amazing that a little girl could escape from the stockade without anyone noticing. Yili looked at him and said, a group of bandits actually managed to kidnap two people right under the emperor's nose. I'm also very surprised. The one-eyed man snorted and said, the people I sent to follow your girl to get money haven't come back yet. What do you think happened to them? Yili shook her head and pretended to be at a loss. It seems that your girl is a master. Maybe she has gone down the mountain to find reinforcements now. What do you think you need to do to save your life before the reinforcements come? The one-eyed man stared at the indifferent girl in front of him viciously. Yili raised her hand and touched her carefully bandaged shoulder helplessly. She said, maybe you can consider taking a sum of money from me and then go away. I think your two men didn't come back because they want to do something to my girl. Since you know that my girl is a master, you should also think that the other one won't be too bad. So our deal can actually continue. It seems that Miss Yi likes to solve problems with money? The one-eyed man sneered. Yili shook her head. Didn't you take someone else's money to make things difficult for me? Since the other party didn't want to buy my life, then I think your purpose has been achieved. I believe that before tomorrow, the whole capital will spread the rumor that third Miss Yi was kidnapped by bandits. And I just spend some money so that I won't suffer any real harm and you won't violate the deal with the other party. Why not kill two birds with one stone? It sounds very reasonable. Someone told me that problems that can be solved with money are not problems. This time I won't renege on the debt. I'll give you the money as soon as I'm free. I can even pay the deposit first. Yili smiled. What if I don't agree? The one-eyed man narrowed his eyes. Yili said indifferently, if I die, the Yi family and Su family will definitely do their best to encircle and annihilate you. If I was still alive, I would consider using all of my assets, including the Su family's dowry and the betrothal gifts of Ding Guang Fu as a bounty. I would offer a bounty all over the world to kill you. I won't take your life. As long as I can see your blade once, I will give you 1,000 taels. How many people do you think will accept it? The one-eyed man's mouth twitched. Very vicious. The premise is that you can find me. Yili's smile widened. Someone in the Tianyi pavilion owes me a life. The mocking smile on the one-eyed man's face finally froze completely. The viciousness in his single eye gradually dissipated and was replaced by a sharp edge. Although he still had that terrifying face, in an instant he gave off the aura of a superior. You are indeed Emo Xiuyao's woman. You are indeed extraordinary. Yi Li smiled bitterly. It's just to save my life. Perhaps you are willing to show your true face? To be honest, I don't like to talk to people who wear masks. The one-eyed man stared at her in surprise. You can tell? I thought my disguise technique was good enough to pass off as the real thing. Yi Li said, I'm probably more sensitive to these things. I think there is still a difference between a human skin mask and a real face, isn't there? The one-eyed man rubbed his face in disgust. Time is too tight. It's a defective product that was made in a hurry. Since you know someone wants to ruin your reputation, do you know what the other party wants? Yi Li looked at him. I'd like to hear the details. The one-eyed man walked to the side and sat down. He stared at Yi Li with a teasing gaze. The other party wants to ruin your reputation. Pay attention, they really want to ruin. Yi Li's eyes turned cold. It's a woman. The one-eyed man raised his eyebrows in surprise. Yi Li frowned. Only women like to use such a vicious method to deal with other women. The one-eyed man shrugged. I definitely won't tell you who the other party is. Aren't you afraid? Yi Li looked at him seriously. She thought for a bit and said, You don't plan on doing that, right? The man nodded and laughed. I have to admit, Emo Xiuyao really does have a good eye. At least he's much better than that idiot Emo Jingli. I really don't plan on doing that. After all, I don't plan on angering Emo Xiuyao for a few thousand taels of silver. You know Emo Xiuyao? Yi Li pointed out. The one-eyed man didn't deny it. He stood up and said, We can leave now. Third Miss Yi, let's go get the money I deserve and then send you home. What do you think? I estimate that in another 2 to 4 hours, Emo Xiuyao should be here. It's not safe here. Yi Li indifferently followed him and stood up. She asked, What about the people in your stronghold? The one-eyed man turned around and gave her a twisted smile. You don't really think that I'm a bandit leader, do you? Don't worry, even though I'm not a bandit leader, but the people in this stronghold are all bandits who do all kinds of evil. They're just unlucky to be caught in Emo Xiuyao's hands. The original one-eyed leader wasn't killed by you, right? Yi Li followed the man through the crude houses. Along the way, the bandits who passed by on patrol bowed to the one-eyed man. When they saw Yi Li following behind him, they all revealed a wretched smile. The guards here really aren't that good. No wonder Qing Wan didn't alert the people in the stronghold at all. You actually know about this. They really aren't that good. If it wasn't for my help, these idiots wouldn't have been able to leave the capital and would have been caught. The one-eyed man replied, That greedy guy is sleeping soundly in his room. He actually wants to monopolize all the bounty. I've always been the one to make money, leaving others with no money to earn. When Emo Xiuyao comes, I'll use him as a scapegoat. What do you think of this idea? Yi Li nodded indifferently. She looked at the road in front of her that was getting more and more remote. We're leaving from here? The man nodded. Don't worry, as long as I get the money, I'll definitely send you back to the Yi family unscathed. Just as he was about to raise his hand to fiddle with the mechanism, a strange sound came from the foot of the mountain. Yi Li didn't make a sound, but the one-eyed man's expression immediately changed. He cursed in a low voice, Damn it. How could he come so fast? After saying this, he immediately gave up the original road and pulled Yi Li in another direction. We're not going to take the secret passage? The man said, It's not safe to take the secret passage and it's too circuitous. Maybe we'll be caught in the middle. Listening to the sound that was gradually getting closer, there was still no movement in the stronghold. It was obvious that the people who came were all experts. The mob in the stronghold didn't even find a trace of them. The man pulled Yi Li towards the back of the mountain. There's another road in the back of the mountain. Although it's a bit dangerous, it leads directly to a valley. Emo Xiuyao definitely won't be able to find it in a short time. Chapter 65. But Yi Li said. Relax, my qinggong is not bad. I can still go down with you. But I want to renege on my debt. Yi Li said with a smile. A crescent moon hung in the sky, not too far away, not too close. A cool breeze blew from the top of the mountain. The one-eyed man lying on the cliff had a regretful and bitter smile on his face. Miss Yi, isn't this method too despicable? Yi Li leisurely sat by his side. She casually pulled off the cloth on her shoulder that was dyed red with rouge and threw it down the cliff. She indifferently shrugged and said, "You're not a gentleman, I won't feel guilty." The method was not important, the result was the most important. "Don't move." The thin and sharp blade was pressed against the man's pulse on his neck. "I don't recommend you to act rashly before you have absolute confidence in your ability to do so. If I stab forward half an inch, even a golden immortal won't be able to save you. It's a very special poison. Can I ask what kind of strange poison you used to deal with your savior?" The man helplessly gave up on the idea of using his internal energy to temporarily stop the poison. In fact, he could not use any internal energy right now. Yili shook her head. "It's a secret. But the title of savior is still up for debate. Speaking of which, I've been in a very bad mood recently." "It's an honor to hear the #1 talented woman in the capital complain," the man said with a smile. But when paired with his frightening appearance, it seemed a bit funny. Yili frowned and said, "Ever since Prince Ding and I were arranged to be married, it seems like all kinds of trouble have come knocking on our door. Constantly probing, spying, looking for trouble, and of course kidnapping. Since it's so troublesome, why don't you elope with me? What do you think?" Yi Li's long eyelashes gently fluttered. "I'm not interested in the play between the talented man and the beautiful woman. Moreover, I'm guessing that the play must have forgotten to tell the beautiful woman what to do with her parents, relatives, sisters, and reputation. What are we going to rely on to survive? What if you elope with another beauty?" The man looked at her in disappointment. After a while he said, "You think too much. Didn't the drama say that the gifted scholar would definitely become the top scholar in the future? She would be rich and her parents would forgive her relatives would envy her, and her sisters would be jealous of her. Most importantly, in the end, the gifted scholar and the beautiful woman will definitely live happily ever after, right?" Yili shook her head. "In the movie it only says that this is the end of the drama. Most people imagine that they will grow old together and be in love forever, okay?" The man thought about it carefully. There really didn't seem to be any dramas or storybooks where the couple grew old together and had many children and grandchildren. "Very well, my lady. What will it take for you to let me go?" The man seemed to understand that it was useless to beat around the bush with Yili, so he asked directly. "Tell me who wants to harm me." Yili didn't beat around the bush and asked straightforwardly. "What will happen if I don't say anything?" The cold blade gently slid across his neck and small bumps appeared on the skin on his neck. "Don't worry, I won't stab you with a knife. I will directly push you down." Yili looked down at the bottomless valley and smiled. "Why don't you just stab me with a knife?" The man didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "No, I really can't say that." "You can say that. I promise someone else." A man's words carry enormous weight. "Even if you stab me to death, I won't say anything," the man said firmly. Yili looked at him for a while and raised her eyebrows. "All right. Since it's like this, then let me see what kind of face is hidden under this mask. Miss Yi, how about you let me go now and I owe you a favor?" The man tried to negotiate. "This sounds a bit familiar. However, do you think that I would trust someone whose identity I don't even know? Even if you owe me 100 favors, I won't be able to find you." Yili held the dagger in one hand and pointed it at the man's neck. Her other hand began to search that twisted and ugly face. "Miss Yi, I have 20,000 silver taels on me. Take it and treat it as a way to get over your shock. How about we write off today's matter?" Yili's hand did not stop as she lightly said, "Do you think that I'm like you, willing to risk my life for money? If we write it off this time, how would I know if there won't be a next time?" The man was silent for a moment before saying, "I don't know if there will be a next time, but I can guarantee that I won't make things difficult for Miss Yi. How about it?" Feeling Yi Li's hand paused for a moment, the man quickly added, "I promise that I will never make things difficult for Miss Yi again. You can tell this to Imo Xiao. He knows who I am and knows if my words can be trusted." The cold blade on his neck finally left a bit. Yi Li stood up. "I'll trust you for now. The antidote." "No, the antidote was given to me by Qin Yu. Although you can't use your internal strength, it shouldn't be a problem if you don't use your Qinggong," Yi Li said with a faint smile. The man clenched his teeth, but the sound of footsteps not far away made him unable to argue with Yi Li. He could only stand up and prepare to use a method he had never used before to climb down the valley. But unfortunately he was a step too slow. A cold voice came from the other side of the path. "Han Mingyue, A plain-clothed man sitting in a wheelchair slowly appeared at the end of the path. Behind him was the silent brown-clothed youth who was steadily pushing the wheelchair. Even on this uneven mountain peak he didn't seem to be struggling at all. Sitting in the wheelchair, Emo Xiaoyao's face was as calm as water. He stared at the one-eyed man with a cold and deep gaze. With just a glance, the one-eyed man felt his body stiffen as if he was frozen in ice. He could only bitterly smile as he looked at the cliff less than 2 steps away from him. "Li, are you all right?" Emo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li with a warm gaze. Yi Li calmly put away her dagger under his gaze. She walked in front of him and said with an apologetic smile, "Sorry I made you worry." Emo Xiaoyao's eyes flashed and his brows furrowed. In the end he sighed softly and said, "You're tired. Let's talk when we get back." Yi Li also felt that the current environment wasn't suitable for talking. She nodded in agreement with Emo Xiaoyao's suggestion. One of the women following behind Emo Xiaoyao and Ajin gave a cloak to Yi Li. Yi Li faintly smiled. Even though she felt that it wasn't too cold, she still put on the cloak. "Han Mingyue, can you tell me why you're here?" Emo Xiaoyao asked as he stared sharply at the man on the cliff. "You can recognize me even like this?" The man sighed. He reached out and searched his face for a while. Then he pulled off a leather mask, revealing his originally handsome but dejected face. When she heard Emo Xiaoyao mention the name Han Mingyue, Yi Li only raised her eyebrows. When the man took off his mask and saw his handsome face, she wasn't too surprised. This face was at least 80% similar to that Feng Yu from a while ago. However, that face was easily seductive and frivolous, while this face was much more decent. The same raised eyebrows and smiling expression gave off a carefree and unrestrained feeling. Chapter 66. "Ha Xiao, we haven't seen each other in so many years. I didn't expect to see you again under such circumstances. It's really a pity." Even though the handsome man was dressed in the rough clothes of a bandit, he still gave off the impression of a distinguished and elegant young master. However, the slightly fawning expression on his face made people feel slightly uncomfortable. "You must have said that I would come all the way here to congratulate you on your wedding. It seems like you still don't welcome old friends. Your congratulations are to kidnap my fiancé?" Emo Xiaoyao's voice was deep and pleasant. Yi Li, who was standing behind him, unconsciously pulled her cloak closer. "It's a misunderstanding," Han Mingyue said helplessly with a bitter expression. "I didn't know that the person I was going to kidnap was your fiancé. However, I've already accepted the deal. If I can't complete it, how can I, Han Mingyue, keep my reputation and face? I've already tried my best to minimize the loss. Now I've completed the deal and your fiancé is safe and sound. Moreover, I've been tricked by her. I'm the one who's losing out, okay? Who paid for it?" Emo Xiaoyao stared at her and asked. "I can't say." Han Mingyue smiled bitterly. Emo Xiaoyao sneered. "Han Mingyue, as long as there's money, is there anything you don't dare to sell other than your brother?" Han Mingyue sighed. The expression on her face became even more bitter. She looked at Emo Xiaoyao and said, "There's always 1 or 2 things that I can't sell no matter what. Moreover, Mingxi was dealt with badly by you this time. Xiao, for my sake, can you not pursue the matter this time? I promise there won't be a next time." Emo Xiaoyao's expression darkened. Han Mingyue stomped her feet and said, "We'll send 10% of the Tianyi Pavilion's profits this year to my sister-in-law." "Han Mingyue, you're too nervous." Emo Xiaoyao raised his hand and touched the mask on his face. Han Mingyue froze and a trace of annoyance flashed across her face. How could he forget that Emo Xiaoyao knew him too well? If he didn't appear so nervous, it would be difficult for Emo Xiaoyao to determine his target. "Xiaoyao, I'm begging you." After looking deeply at Han Mingyue's pleading face for a while, Emo Xiaoyao spat out these 2 words, "Scram." In the face of such rude treatment, Han Mingyue's face was filled with joy. "I will definitely send an apology gift to sister-in-law's residence within 3 days." Emo Xiaoyao's reply was to raise his hand slightly. Black Cloud Cavalry, fire. The people who were originally standing around in a semicircle, wrapped in black clothes and wearing black headscarves, had unknowingly grabbed their bows and arrows. Draw the bow and release the arrow. Han Mingyue could only helplessly fall down the cliff. "Emo Xiaoyao, you're ruthless." Han Mingyue's pitiful cries disappeared from the cliff. Yi Li blinked and lowered her head to look at Emo Xiaoyao. She wasn't sure if Han Mingyue was still hiding his strength. At the very least, even if she was in her best condition, there was no way she would be fine after falling down from here. As if he knew her doubts, Emo Xiao explained, Han Mingyue likes to leave a backup plan behind. He definitely has some arrangements below. He won't die from the fall. Yi Li frowned. So her threat to throw him down was not a threat at all. As expected, it was easy to make mistakes if you didn't understand your enemy. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you won't be defeated in 100 battles. The war saint didn't lie to me. Let's go back. Emo Xiao reached out his hand and said softly. Okay. In the other courtyard of the Su Fu, she finally managed to get rid of her 2 uncles and 5 cousins with great difficulty. On one hand, Yi Li felt that dealing with so many people at the same time was a bit of a headache. At the same time, she could feel the uncontrollable warmth and joy of being cared for by her family. Emo Xiao sat to the side and silently looked at the young girl sitting across from him. He suddenly found that he didn't understand his fiancée at all. In reality, his fiancée wasn't even 16 yet, but she was unexpectedly strong, decisive and mature. What was he doing when he was 15 or 16? Emo Xiao rarely thought about the past, but looking at the young girl's faint smile in front of him, he felt that it wasn't that painful to think about the past. When he was 15 or 16, he was in the prime of his youth. Riding a horse in the capital, he was frivolous and wanton. Who in the world didn't know that the young master of the Ding King's household was a young hero? Who in the world didn't know that the young general of the Ding King's household had swept through the southern border like a god at a young age? Even on the bloody battlefield, he was still in high spirits, his words and actions unrestrained. But when this young girl was 15 years old, she had already experienced things that most girls would never experience in their lifetime. Losing her mother at a young age, breaking off the engagement, being schemed against by her stepmother, a dismal reputation, a marriage that everyone was afraid of, being plotted against, being kidnapped. But he had never seen her panicked appearance before. Even after encountering this kind of situation today, she didn't cry or get angry after escaping danger. She even smiled and said sorry to him for making him worry. If he was in her position, he definitely wouldn't be able to be this calm at her age. Emo Xiao sighed in his heart. Li, I'm very sorry about today's matter. After a long time, Emo Xiao said in a soft voice. Yi Li looked up at him and smiled. This isn't something you can control. I was too careless. But, tomorrow in the capital, I'm afraid it will affect the Ding King's household's reputation. Emo Xiao looked at her, his eyes deep and unfathomable. I have the final say in the Ding King's household as long as you don't regret it. Yi Li blinked and instantly understood what he meant. He had the final say in the Ding King's household, so no matter what her reputation became, it wouldn't affect their marriage. Was it like this? Tilting her head to think, Yi Li helplessly smiled and said, I think if I regret it, I probably won't be able to get married in this lifetime. Then how about, we make do? Emo Xiao's lips curled into a hard-to-see curve. That's for the best. I also feel that if you regret it, it won't be easy for me to find a suitable princess in this lifetime. Yi Li looked at him with a smile and said, since the prince doesn't mind, then let's make do. Seeing the young girl sitting in front of the window turn around and smile at him, saying let's make do, Emo Xiao suddenly felt his heart sway. Under the candlelight, the young girl's slightly pale face seemed to glow faintly, making one's heart skip a beat. Emo Xiao quickly moved away and supported his forehead with his hand, saying, Han Mingyue will probably send you something in the next 2 days. Don't worry about him, just accept it. Yi Li said in surprise, will he really give me 10% of the Tianyi Pavilion's income? The Tianyi Pavilion was the largest intelligence organization in Dechu State. Even 10% of the income from selling all kinds of information every year was absolutely shocking. Emo Xiao nodded and looked at Yi Li, wanting to say something but hesitated. Yi Li said with a smile, there's no need to talk about today's matter, since you've already agreed to Han Mingyue. Although I'm not sure how powerful the Tianyi Pavilion and the Wind and Moon Pavilion are, I don't really want to be enemies with him. However, this is the only time. If that person makes any moves in the future and falls into my hands, I won't accept his pleading. Of course. After a moment of silence, Emo Xiao looked seriously at Yi Li and promised, since Miss Li doesn't regret it, then you and I are family in the future. Anyone who wants to hurt Miss Li is my enemy. Chapter 67. Yi nodded with a smile and did not say anything. The crescent moon outside the window gradually set behind the roof. The young girl raised her head to look at the waning moon in the sky. Her beautiful face was bathed in a layer of quiet light by the moonlight. Behind her, the young man in the wheelchair focused on the young girl's slender figure. His gentle gaze was filled with an inexplicable light. In a secret base of the Tianyi Pavilion in the capital, Han Mingyue fell into the room in a sorry state, startling the people in the room. "Brother, what happened to you?" Young Master Feng Yu, who made countless parents want to skin him alive and countless young girls fall head over heels for him, was stunned for a moment. He hurriedly rushed over to catch his brother's tottering body. Han Mingyue waved his hand and allowed his brother to help him sit down on a soft couch. He smiled bitterly and said, "I've offended the devil." Although he was used to being fully prepared when he jumped off the cliff, no matter how careful he was, he still suffered internal and external injuries from the impact of the protruding branches. Regarding this, he didn't have any resentment in his heart. Everyone knew that Emo Shuyao had indeed shown mercy. Otherwise, no one in the Black Cloud Cavalry would have missed a person who had lost all his internal energy with their archery skills. Brother, you've seen third young Mistress Yi?" Han Mingxi asked in surprise as he felt Han Mingyue's pulse. Han Mingyue forced himself to sit up. He looked at his brother and narrowed his eyes. "How did you know? You offended Emo Shuyao in the capital this time. Don't tell me it's because of this young Mistress Yi?" Han Mingxi rubbed his nose awkwardly and tried to smile apologetically. "Brother, that I also fell into Yi Li's hands last time because of the same medicine. That I owe her a favor. Can you not cause trouble for her?" Han Mingyue sneered. "You think the Tianyi Pavilion owes her a favor?" Han Mingxi lowered his head in shame and counted with his fingers. That woman is very smart. I didn't say anything, but she already guessed the relationship between the Tianyi Pavilion and the Wind and Moon Inn. She took my jade pendant. I can't do anything about it. That's my jade pendant. Hand it over. Who knows what kind of trouble it will cause if it's on you." Han Mingyue stretched out her hand. Han Mingxi did not dare to disobey and obediently handed over the jade pendant. Anyway, he had no interest in the Wind and Moon Pavilion or the Tianyi Pavilion. He only took his brother's jade pendant for fun. "Brother, are you seriously injured? I'll call the doctor." Seeing her usually frivolous brother's face filled with worry, Han Mingyue's expression softened a little. She said softly, "It's nothing serious. It's just that I can't use my internal energy. There's no need to call a doctor. Are there any guests?" Han Mingxi's face sank. She wasn't sure if Han Mingyue was still hiding his strength. At the very least, even if she was in her best condition, there was no way she would be fine after falling down from here. As if he knew her doubts, Emo Shuyao explained, "Han Mingyue likes to leave a backup plan behind. He definitely has some arrangements below. He won't die from the fall." Yi Li frowned. So her threat to throw him down was not a threat at all. As expected, it was easy to make mistakes if you didn't understand your enemy. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you won't be defeated in 100 battles. The war saint didn't lie to me. Let's go back. Emo Shuyao reached out his hand and said softly. Okay. In the other courtyard of the Su Fu, she finally managed to get rid of her 2 uncles and 5 cousins with great difficulty. On one hand, Yi Li felt that dealing with so many people at the same time was a bit of a headache. At the same time, she could feel the uncontrollable warmth and joy of being cared for by her family. Emo Shuyao sat to the side and silently looked at the young girl sitting across from him. He suddenly found that he didn't understand his fiancée at all. In reality, his fiancée wasn't even 16 yet, but she was unexpectedly strong, decisive and mature. What was he doing when he was 15 or 16? Emo Shuyao rarely thought about the past, but looking at the young girl's faint smile in front of him, he felt that it wasn't that painful to think about the past. When he was 15 or 16, he was in the prime of his youth. Riding a horse in the capital, he was frivolous and wanton. Who in the world didn't know that the young master of the Ding King's household was a young hero? Who in the world didn't know that the young general of the Ding King's household had swept through the southern border like a god at a young age? Even on the bloody battlefield, he was still in high spirits, his words and actions unrestrained. But when this young girl was 15 years old, she had already experienced things that most girls would never experience in their lifetime. Losing her mother at a young age, breaking off the engagement, being schemed against by her stepmother, a dismal reputation, a marriage that everyone was afraid of, being plotted against, being kidnapped. But he had never seen her panicked appearance before. Even after encountering this kind of situation today, she didn't cry or get angry after escaping danger. She even smiled and said sorry to him for making him worry. If he was in her position, he definitely wouldn't be able to be this calm at her age. Mo Shuyao sighed in his heart. Li, I'm very sorry about today's matter. After a long time, Mo Shuyao said in a soft voice. Yi Li looked up at him and smiled. This isn't something you can control. I was too careless. But tomorrow in the capital, I'm afraid it will affect the Ding King's household's reputation. I let you, the head of the Tianyi Pavilion, the most handsome man in Jiangnan, do it personally. It's a gift to her. Why didn't you do it? The woman said unhappily. Enough. Han Mingyue said coldly, why didn't you ask me how I was injured and how I was injured? Do you think that if I really did something to Yi Li, I would be able to come back alive tonight? The woman's breath stopped. She seemed to have noticed her loss of composure. She looked at him apologetically and said softly, why did you go alone? If you brought more people, even if Mo Shuyao brought the Black Cloud Cavalry, they might not be able to hurt you. With the current situation, it's impossible for him to mobilize a large number of Black Cloud Cavalry. Han Mingyue's cold expression softened as the woman's soft voice softened. He said indifferently, because I can't drag the Tianyi Pavilion down with me. This is a private matter between you and me. Naturally, I'll deal with it myself. You should take care of yourself. In the future, don't come looking for me regarding Yi Li's matters. I won't help you anymore. Why? Because next time Shuyao will definitely kill me. I'm a businesswoman. I've never wanted to challenge the Mo family's bottom line. You should go. Be careful. After speaking, Han Mingyue leaned against the soft couch and closed his eyes. He no longer paid any attention to the woman in black at the door. The woman in black clearly still had something to say. However, when she saw the ashen-faced man lying on the soft couch with rejection written all over his body, she could only swallow the words she wanted to say. She snorted softly and said, then rest well. I'll go back first. She turned and walked out the door. Not far from the door, a man who resembled Han Mingyue stared at her with gloomy eyes. You don't have to come again. We're going back to Jiangnan soon. The woman in black turned to the side. Her charming eyes lifted slightly with a hint of disdain. If you have time, go pick a few more flowers. Don't meddle in other people's business. I don't want Mingyue to tell me that she's missing a younger brother. Han Mingxi's expression darkened. He sneered and said, just as well. I'll see what kind of person has captivated my brother. Not many people knew how good Sir Feng Yu's martial arts were. However, his qinggong was definitely not something that could be bragged about. The man who was originally standing under the tree only lightly fluttered his sleeves. In an instant he disappeared from under the tree. In the blink of an eye, he was already standing beside the woman in black. He reached out to pull the black veil on her face. Impudent. Chapter 68. Mingxi, stop. At the door, Han Mingyue gloomily looked at the two people who were at daggers drawn. Let her go. Han Mingxi angrily swung his hand and jumped up, disappearing from the roof. Han Mingyue stared at the woman in black in the courtyard with warning eyes. Don't provoke Mingxi. As long as he doesn't provoke me, why would I provoke him? Mingyu, he is still your brother. We are friends, aren't we? The woman laughed softly. Bang. Han Mingyue took a step back and slammed the door in her face. Han Ming. You. The woman in black's eyes flashed with shock as she shouted hatefully. She saw that the candles in the room were extinguished very quickly. It was obvious that the person inside was preparing to sleep. She snorted and turned to leave the quiet and dark courtyard. The woman in black walked out of the inconspicuous courtyard. Immediately, a few men in black came forward. Mississippi, the woman nodded and said coldly, let's go back. The leader of the men in black could see that the woman was not in a good mood and did not dare to say anything. He waved his hand and a few men protected the woman as they quickly left in the dark night. Whoosh! An arrow pierced through the air with the force of 1,000 catties. The leader of the men in black quickly pulled out his sword and tried to block the arrow. But that arrow was not so easy to block. He only felt the sword in his hand shake, and even the hand holding the sword suddenly became numb. The arrow brushed past the sword and shot towards the woman in black who was behind him. Ah! Miss. The arrow flew past the woman's face and was firmly fixed on the wall by the roadside not far away. The woman in black looked back at the arrow that was deeply embedded in the wall. Her body went soft and she almost fell. Just a little more and that arrow would have destroyed her face even if it did not pierce through her head. Mississippi, the people around her hurriedly went over to support her, but the woman waved her hand to shake them off. Then she raised her hand and slapped the black-clothed man's face. Trash. The black-clothed man lowered his head sadly. Fengjiao. A burst of clear laughter came from the roof not far away. The woman raised her head and saw Fengjiao dressed in flamboyant red clothes. He was leisurely sitting on the roof and looking down at her sorry state. Fengjiao raised his handsome eyebrows and gestured to her with a bow in his left hand. Fengjiao, how dare you? The woman gritted her teeth. Oh, I'm so scared. It's not illegal for me to shoot 1 or 2 sneaky men in black in the middle of the night, right? Perhaps Lord Qin would even be grateful to me for contributing to the security of the capital. Don't kill him for me. The woman pointed at the roof with her slender finger, her voice filled with killing intent. As soon as she thought of that arrow, she couldn't help but want to tear the arrogant man in front of her into pieces. You want to compete with me in terms of numbers? Do you think I'm afraid of you? Fengjiao lazily raised his hand and waved behind him. A similar group of black-clothed people silently appeared on the roof, but each of them held a bow and arrow in their hands. They directly drew their bows and aimed their arrows accurately at the narrow street below. The woman in black was so angry that her eyes were about to burst into flames. She gritted her teeth and arrogantly said, Fengjiao, do you dare to kill me? Fengjiao regretfully shook his head. I don't dare. Hearing his answer, the woman's confidence increased. She slightly raised her chin and said, Since you don't dare, then scram far away. Fuck. This young master hates arrogant women the most. Fengjiao's evil phoenix eyes flashed with a cold light. He quickly raised his hand and shot an arrow. Another arrow flew past the woman's clothes and landed at her feet. Fengjiao. Fengjiao lazily looked at her. His gaze was even more disdainful than the woman's. Don't call me that. This young master won't fall in love with you. Someone told me to warn you to stop messing around. Otherwise, tonight's arrow will not hit the wall. Even if you don't believe in this young master's archery, you shouldn't doubt them. He raised his hand and pointed at the black-clothed man Fengjiao. No. This is impossible. The black-clothed woman stared at the black-clothed man behind Fengjiao in shock. How could he? Fengjiao, you dare use the Black Cloud Cavalry without permission? He, a woman who deceives herself. Fengjiao impatiently sat up and said, Just remember this young master's warning. Or else you'll blame this young master for not telling you the next time you're disfigured. The black-clothed woman lowered her eyes and did not say anything. Fengjiao was not in the mood to argue with her. He said to the people behind him, Finish what you need to do. Everyone can leave. So, several sounds of wind breaking through the air. The people who were protecting the woman fell to the ground. Only the leader was left holding his sword tightly. But he knew in his heart that the hand holding the sword did not have any strength after that arrow. If another arrow came, he would not be able to block or escape. Fengjiao, you casually used the Black Cloud Cavalry. Aren't you afraid that the people in the palace will find out? The black-clothed woman finally opened her mouth. Fengjiao waved his hand and said with a smile, You should first think about how to explain the sudden disappearance of so many people by your side. In the end, the woman did not say anything else. She brought the last remaining guard and left this deserted street with hatred. When she left, the black-clothed man on the roof also quickly disappeared into the night. Fengjiao turned around and flipped over the roof. He entered the room through the half-open window. He looked at the man sitting inside and said with a helpless smile, How is it? Is eldest young Master Su satisfied? Su Qingchen sat peacefully by the window. In front of him was a jug of wine and 2 wine cups. He raised his hand and poured the 2 cups of wine. Putting down the jug, he raised his head and smiled at Fengjiao. Thank the prince for me. The news that the Yi third young miss, the future Princess Ding, had been kidnapped by bandits was shocking in the capital. Not long after Yi Li had been kidnapped, the news had already begun to circulate in the capital. If one tried to forcefully suppress the rumors, It would only make it more conspicuous and become more and more intense. Therefore, no matter if it was the Yi family, the Su family, or the Li palace, no one publicly expressed an opinion. The next morning, when Yi Li sat in a carriage with all kinds of rewards from the palace and was escorted by the Su family's second young master and third young master from the Su family back to the Yi family, the rumors in people's hearts gradually began to shake. After all, the people who happened to pass by unintentionally saw that the Yi third young miss was fine in both her appearance and body. It did not look like she had just been kidnapped. As for the two young masters of the Su family, even third young master Su, who was said to have the worst temper and could not hide his thoughts, did not seem to be acting strangely. So, yesterday's news was just a malicious rumor? Yi Li indifferently listened to Qing Shuang's long-winded narration of the rumors she had heard from outside. She laughed inwardly. Of course, third brother could calmly come out to meet people because he had already vented most of his anger on those blind bandits last night. Thinking of last night when she had gone down the mountain with Mo Xiuyao, the thick smell of blood in the mountain stronghold, and third brother's murderous appearance, Yi Li believed that the scholarly Su family was about to produce a general. Yi Li did not plan to ask how Mo Xiuyao would deal with those bandits. No matter if they were bandits who had fled to the capital or local bandits, it was always a good thing to have one less group of people. Chapter 69. Third Miss Yi. A clear male voice came from outside the window. Qing Wan immediately pulled out her sword and pointed at the young man who suddenly appeared outside the window. Yi Li smiled and pressed down Qing Wan's arm. She turned around and said with a smile, "Young Master Han, how have you been?" Outside the window was the kidnapper Han Mingyue who had just left last night. Han Mingyue smiled bitterly and helplessly. "Third Miss, do I look good to you?" As soon as he entered the courtyard, he could feel the covetous eyes in the dark. He had no doubt that if he acted rashly now, the master of the Tianyi Pavilion would definitely disappear silently from the world. Taking out a wooden carving box from her sleeve and putting it on the windowsill, Han Mingyue said, "This is for Third Miss to get over the shock. It's also a wedding gift to congratulate Third Miss and Xiuyao. I don't know if I can make it in time to drink a cup of wedding wine." Yi Li nodded. Without looking at the box, she asked, "Is young Master Han ready to leave the capital?" Han Mingyue smiled and said, "I've been frightened a lot recently. Staying in Jiangnan makes me feel more at ease. I welcome Miss Yi and Xiuyao to come to Jiangnan together when you have time. At that time I will definitely do my best as a host." Yi Li smiled and said, "Young Master Han's words make us a little ashamed." Han Mingyue raised her eyebrows and said, "Then, the previous misunderstanding is written off?" Yi Li's eyes turned slightly and said with a smile, "The misunderstanding between you and me is written off. As for the misunderstanding between you and Mo Xiuyao, it's your own business." Han Mingyue was a little disappointed, but she also knew that she was forcing Yi Li. She also appreciated that Yi Li knew how to behave appropriately. She no longer delayed and said, "Now I'll take my leave. Take care. I won't see you off." After Han Mingyue left, Qing Wan stepped forward to take the box on the windowsill and said discontentedly, "Miss, why are you so polite to that kind of person?" Yi Li turned and sat down. She smiled and said, "He was also very polite to us yesterday." Yi Li knew that if Han Mingyue hadn't been wary of Mo Xiuyao from the start, they wouldn't have had the chance to escape unscathed. She believed that Han Mingyue was afraid of Mo Xiuyao, but she didn't believe that Han Mingyue was afraid of Mo Xiuyao. If it wasn't because of him, how could Miss? The people outside are still talking about Miss being kidnapped. It's so unpleasant. Qing Wan didn't think that Han Mingyue was polite to them. If it wasn't because of him, how could Miss be ridiculed by others? Yi Li said faintly, "If it wasn't him, it could be someone else. Not everyone happens to know Prince." After taking the box from Qing Wan and opening it, Yi Li was also a little surprised. There was a thick stack of banknotes neatly placed in the box. 2 banknotes worth 10,000 taels and a dozen banknotes worth 1,000 taels. Qing Wan took a look and couldn't help but exclaim, "Miss." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. She looked a little embarrassed. 20,000 taels of banknotes was equivalent to more than 200,000 taels of silver. Even Yi Li was embarrassed to accept such a large sum of money. Beside the banknotes was a pair of top-grade white jade dragon and phoenix pendants. Just by looking at the quality of the jade, she knew that it must be extraordinary. After thinking about it, Yili closed the box again and passed it to Qing Shuang. Get ready, I'm going to the Prince Ding mansion. Qing Shuang held the box carefully. She also saw it just now. She had never seen so much money since she was young. Boo-hoo, I'm so scared. Yes, Mississippi Lee. Murong Ting's voice came from outside before she entered the door. Yili smiled and got up to welcome her. Qin Zheng, Hua Tianxiang and Qin Yuling, the sister of the capital city magistrate Qin Mu whom she had only met twice, came to visit Yili together. Murong Ting entered the room first and grabbed Yili, asking repeatedly, Miss Li, are you okay? Yili smiled and said, if I'm not okay, why would I be standing here? Why are you guys here? Qin Zheng covered her lips and smiled faintly. Ting ran over early in the morning to drag me and Tianxiang over to look for you. I told her that you were completely fine, but she insisted that she was worried and had to come over to take a look. We met Miss Yuling on the way and came together. Murong Ting hugged Yili and waved her fists. If I find out which bastard is the one who spread the rumors, I'll slap his face so hard that even his parents won't be able to recognize him. This is simply too much, 10,000 times more than that bastard Leng Haoyu. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. Yili smiled at Qin Yuling. Miss Qin, thank you for coming to see me. Qin Yuling smiled shyly. Actually, I'm here to apologize to Miss Yi on behalf of my brother. He just took charge of the capital city magistrate and something like this happened, implicating Miss Ye's reputation. Yili shook her head. Looking at Qin Yuling's expression, she knew that she must have come behind Qin Mu's back. Actually, there was no reason for this kind of thing to be blamed on Qin Mu, the capital city magistrate. Even in her previous life, no matter how advanced the technology was, there was never a lack of crime. Furthermore, at this time people's energy was limited, so how could they manage everything? Lord Qin is the parent magistrate of the capital city's people. He wholeheartedly serves the people and is known as the Iron Face Magistrate. It's just some rumors, Miss Qin doesn't have to care about it. Rumors stop with the wise. If you ignore them, those people will find it boring and naturally won't spread it again. Hearing Yili's words, Qin Yuling also let out a sigh of relief. She and her brother relied on each other for survival since young. Although her brother didn't say it, she knew that this matter involved Ding King's manor, Minister's manor and Su family. Her brother was only a third-ranking magistrate and Qin family didn't have any backing. If she wasn't careful, she could be used as a scapegoat. Thank you, Miss Yi. Hua Tianxiang smiled. Miss Qin, you don't have to thank her. Those vile people are jealous of Miss Li and want to ruin her reputation. Lord Qin can't control everyone's mouths, right? Miss Li, looking at your dressing, are you preparing to go out? Hua Tianxiang noticed Yili's clothes and asked, could it be that we came at a bad time? I just planned to make a trip to Ding King's manor. It's not anything important, it won't be too late to go later. Yili said. Murong Ting rolled her eyes and smiled maliciously. So our Miss Li is already so familiar with Prince Ding? Yili rolled her eyes in annoyance. Murong Ting didn't care at all and said cheerfully, why do we have to personally go to Ding King's manor? Wouldn't it be enough to send an invitation to Prince Ding to come out? At the same time, we can also let those talkative vile people know that no matter how hard they try, they won't be able to separate Miss Li and Prince Ding. Qin Yuling looked at Murong Ting with some doubt. Does Miss Murong know who did it? Just call me Murong. Murong Ting said confidently. Who else could it be? It must be that Prince Li who can't bear to see Miss Li live well. I've never seen a man more petty than him in my life. He's a perfect match for Ying. Yili was speechless. Emo Jingli was really wrong this time. However, it should be because his character was too bad that he was so easily suspected, right? The other three people looked at each other. However, after seeing Murong Ting's confident expression and thinking about the grudges between Emo Jingli and Yili, they all agreed with Murong Ting's guess. Even Qin Yuling had an expression of not expecting Prince Li to be such a person. Chapter 70. Prince Li's temper was not good. This was not a secret among the nobles in the capital. However, if one were to observe carefully, they would discover that His Highness Prince Li, who was supposed to be proud after the wedding, had an even worse temper than before. Especially when he went out early in the morning and heard people talking about Yili, his mood should be incomparably good. But he found that when he passed by, people would intentionally or unintentionally look at him strangely, or they would quickly shut up and change the topic to talk about unrelated things. Even when he was drinking tea, he could feel the eyes of everyone in the tea house secretly looking at him. Something happened to Yili, that woman, and the one being laughed at should be Mo Xiuyao. Why did he feel like everyone was laughing at him? Most of the people in the capital were still kind, so when they saw Mo Jingli appear, even if they knew that they could not offend the emperor's younger brother, they still gave him a look of disdain. What kind of person was he? It was fine if he broke off a girl's engagement for no reason, but he also couldn't bear to see her doing well. Not only did he ruin the girl's reputation, but now he was spreading such vile rumors? If this was a normal girl, wouldn't she have been forced to die? This kind of person, even if he was a relative of the emperor, would still be called scum. Prince. The people following Mo Jingli were also frightened by the pressure around their prince. What is going on? Mo Jingli gritted his teeth and asked. Garde looked around and sadly found that he was the closest to the prince. The other guards had already moved to the side and said in a trembling voice, replying to Prince, everyone is talking about Yi. Third young Miss Yi. I know that they are talking about that woman. What does talking about that woman have to do with I? They all looked at I like I was scum. Did they think that I did not see it? Shouldn't they be mocking that woman and laughing at Mo Xiuyao for being cuckolded? Someone said that Prince, you can't bear to see third young Miss Yi and hate that third young Miss Yi is about to happily join the Ding Palace and was rude to you at Chuxiang Pavilion before, so you deliberately spread rumors. Cough cough, to destroy third young Miss Ye's reputation. Imperial bodyguard A, who intended to use his fastest speed to make things clear, had his face flushed red. Before he could finish his words, he looked at his prince in horror as he crushed the folding fan in his hand into pieces. What did you say? Mo Jingli's body was emitting waves of energy. Everyone who passed by couldn't help but take a detour. Prince. It wasn't me who said it, it was all the people in the capital who said it. Garde said in his heart, feeling wronged. In short, Li Palace's reputation had reached a new low after the prince seduced his fiancée's younger sister and bought things without paying. Li Jing, come up quickly. There's no one upstairs, let's sit outside. A clear female voice rescued the almost frozen imperial bodyguard A. When he saw his prince's gaze quickly turn to the staircase, the imperial bodyguard quickly curled himself into a ball and hid in a safe place. Mu Rongting, wearing a delicate and beautiful red dress, took the lead to walk up to the second floor. She even turned around and waved to her friends behind her. The child who was leading the way in front of her simply wanted to cry. Miss Mu Rongting, it's not that there's no one upstairs. We are here in one of the best tea houses in the capital. It's that everyone was scared away by Prince Li Yi. When she turned around, Mu Rongting saw Mo Jingli, whose face was as black as ink. She couldn't help but look back and consider whether to change to another tea house. But at this moment Hua Tianxiang and the others also walked up. Thus, the group of 5 girls helplessly stared at each other. Yili was even more helpless. She even suspected that she really had some ill-fated relationship with Mo Jingli in her previous life. No matter where she went, it seemed that as long as she went out she would run into him. Yili didn't know. Actually, this wasn't too strange. Because even though the capital was the most prosperous city in the Dechu state, it wasn't that big compared to the big cities in her memory. And the nobles couldn't go to the same place as the commoners. Basically, they could only go to a few places. So, unless it was someone like Yili who didn't go out much or someone like Mu Rongting who often ran around, they would basically only go to a tea house where they knew each other. Mr. Li. Mu Rongting looked at Yili apologetically. She really didn't think that the newly married Prince Li would come to a tea house to drink tea alone in the middle of the day instead of accompanying his wife at home. It's alright, let's just stay here. Yili also knew that she couldn't blame Mu Rongting. Besides, she didn't have any intention of avoiding Mo Jingli. They were all in the same capital. They were all from noble families and were even relatives. Where could she avoid him? Indifferently nodding at Mo Jingli, Yili pulled Qin Zheng and Qin Yuling to a relatively quiet corner. Mu Rongting stuck out her tongue. She pulled Hua Tianxiang and hurriedly followed. Sai, do you think Prince Ding will come or not? Mu Rongting asked in a low voice. She didn't grow up in the capital, so she wasn't familiar with Prince Ding. Hua Tianxiang was full of confidence. She nodded and said, "Don't worry, my grandfather said that Prince Ding is a pretty good person. Since he received the invitation, he will definitely come." Qin Yuling said in a low voice, Then let's leave early. Let's not disturb Mr. Li and Prince Ding's conversation. Mu Rongting giggled and said, it's still early. We came out early. Prince Ding definitely hasn't come out yet. It won't be too late for us to change places when he comes. Ah, did you see the expressions of those people downstairs just now? They became very strange when they saw us come in. I was afraid that their eyeballs would fall into their teacups. Hua Tianxiang snorted and said, those people probably thought that Mr. Li was hiding at home crying. Of course they would be startled when they saw us suddenly appear. Qin Jing covered her mouth and laughed. I've also never seen so many people stunned at the same time. This is the first time in my life that I've been the center of attention. Yili looked at her friends chattering about how they felt when they went out today. She could only shake her head in amusement. In fact, the rumors didn't seem to be as fierce as she had expected. Mo Xiaoyao and her uncle must have done something in secret. At the very least, most people looked at her with surprise or sympathy. It wasn't the disdain and contempt that she had thought would appear. It seemed that most people didn't believe that she had been kidnapped. Yi Li and the others sat in a relatively remote corner, chatting among themselves. Mo Jingli sat alone by the window, drinking tea like it was wine with a calm face. Because he was far away, he couldn't hear what they were talking about. However, he could still feel that they were in a good mood. It seemed that they weren't affected by the rumors at all. Mo Jingli couldn't help but gnash his teeth. It was clearly Yi Li who had gotten into trouble, but Yi Li herself acted as if nothing had happened. Instead, he had to take the blame. However, if he had to rush over and argue with Yi Li, even Mo Jingli felt that he couldn't bring himself to do it. Thus, he could only let the cold wind around him scare away the surrounding guests and continue to drink tea. Chapter 71. Ayalili. Prince Ding is here. Just as they were feeling depressed, they heard Murong Ting's loud voice not far behind them. Everyone on the second floor could hear it. Everyone looked up and saw Murong Ting excitedly lying on the windowsill and looking down. Qin Zheng helplessly pulled her down and turned to Yi Li with a smile. Li go down and pick up Prince. Hua Tianxiang covered her mouth and snickered. She waved her hand and teased, it doesn't matter if he doesn't come back. We will go shopping after eating the snacks. Anyway, there is no extra seat for Prince Ding. Hearing this, the few remaining guests on the second floor began to regret choosing to sit closer to the inside because they were afraid of Prince Li's cold air. Now they could only perk up their ears and try their best to listen to the girls at the table in the corner. Yi Li saw this and couldn't help but laugh. Gossiping was indeed an indispensable nature for people of the same era. Under the direct and obscure gazes of the crowd, Yi Li got up and walked downstairs. When she passed by Mo Jingli's table, she could clearly feel Mo Jingli's fierce glare. Yi Li was helpless. Some people were born to be at odds with each other and couldn't be forced. Seeing third Miss Yi calmly go downstairs, the diners upstairs looked at Mo Jingli with more complicated eyes and expressions. Seeing third Miss Yi so calmly appear in public and calmly go to Prince Ding's appointment, it really didn't seem like something had happened. On the other hand, Prince Li's face was gloomy and ferocious. It was clearly like he was angry that his conspiracy didn't succeed. People secretly exchanged glances and made silent discussions. Mo Jingli finally seemed to be unable to bear this strange atmosphere. He put the teacup back on the table heavily, stood up and looked through the half-open window at the street downstairs. He turned around and went downstairs with a sullen face. The moment Yi Li came down from upstairs, the entire lobby instantly quieted down. When Yi Li walked out with a gentle smile on her face, everyone was about to open their mouths to discuss when they saw Mo Jingli's gloomy face. Then there was another period of silence. But after seeing how the two of them acted, at least the people present were more inclined to sympathize with Yi Li. When Yi Li walked out of the tea house, the Prince Ding mansion's carriage had just stopped. Ajin was about to lift the curtain to invite Mo Xiaoyao down. Xiaoyao. Yi Li softly called out. When Ajin saw Yi Li, he respectfully stood to the side. Yi Li nimbly stepped onto the low stool and got into the carriage. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and raised his eyebrows. Why did you get down? Yi Li sat down across from him and said with a smile. Tianxiang and the others said that there was no place to sit because there were too many people, so they chased me out. It's all their fault. I originally wanted to go to the Prince Ding mansion again tomorrow. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Their fault is very timely. What do you mean? Yi Li asked in confusion. Outside, Jean had already started driving the carriage forward again. Yili thought for a moment, then poked her head out to give a name. She just happened to see Mo Jingli standing at the entrance of the tea house, his eyes gloomy as he looked at their carriage. Mo Xiaoyao said, "This morning, the entire capital was spreading the rumors that Jingli deliberately spread yesterday to embarrass you." Yili was stunned. She kind of understood why Mo Jingli's expression was so ugly. With Mo Jingli's personality, it would be strange if he felt comfortable being wronged. Thinking of Mu Rongting's confident guess, it wasn't just her imagination. "Is there something that Li wants to talk to me about?" Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li's dazed face and asked. Yi Li came back to her senses and nodded her head. "This morning Han Mingyue sent over 20,000 taels in gold notes, 10,000 taels in silver notes and a pair of jade pendants. I originally wanted to bring it with me when I go to the Prince Ding mansion tomorrow, but it's not good to bring it with me when I go out with Tianxiang and the others." Mo Xiaoyao didn't care as he shook his head and said, "That's a gift from him. Just keep it." Yi Li was speechless. A few 100,000 taels in one go. Han Mingyue dared to give it to her, but she was too embarrassed to accept it. "I'll have someone send it to the Prince Ding mansion tomorrow. You can do as you see fit. I have enough money to spend." Mo Xiaoyao sighed helplessly. "Li, Han Mingyue sent it to you, so it's yours. You can rest assured. You don't have to feel that you owe him any favors. Han Mingyue, that kind of person, would feel heartache if he spent an extra tael of silver. He was willing to send it over to you as an apology gift because he felt that it was worth it. You don't have to promise him anything." Yi Li smiled and said, "I really don't have any plans to promise him anything." Yi Li secretly guessed that Han Mingyue must have done something to let Mo Xiaoyao down. This time he was involved in this kind of matter again. She didn't expect that Mo Xiaoyao would let him off so easily. Han Mingyue probably felt guilty, but he couldn't find a way to make up for it. That's why he didn't care about the cost and tried to curry favor with her. It was a pity that Yi Li didn't plan on doing anything that would trigger the flower of friendship between former good friends. So Han Mingyue's money was probably wasted. "So you asked me out today for this matter?" Mo Xiaoyao asked. Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's low and pleasant voice, Yi Li, who was thinking about something, felt her heart jump. She said embarrassedly, "It's really nothing big. Sorry to disturb you." Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao didn't seem to be interested in the things that Han Mingyue sent over, Yi Li couldn't help but be curious about how wealthy the Ding Palace was. "I'm usually very idle." Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. "Since we're already out, can you accompany me to a place?" Yi Li nodded. "I'm not very familiar with the capital. You can make the decision." After getting Yi Li's permission, Mo Xiaoyao instructed Jean, who was driving the carriage. Jean immediately turned the carriage in another direction. In the carriage, Yi Li asked curiously, "Fenghua Building? You're not planning on giving me any jewelry, right? I have a jewelry store that specializes in jewelry." Mo Xiaoyao smiled at her. "Isn't it normal to give your fiancé jewelry? Can't it be?" Yi Li kept her mouth shut. Could she say that he didn't care about visiting her treasure pavilion? Fertile water doesn't flow into 10,000 fields? Even if she hadn't been in a relationship before, she knew that these words would spoil the mood. But, was Mo Xiaoyao trying to curry favor with her? Yi Li felt a strange irritation in her heart. But looking at Mo Xiaoyao's gentle and calm expression, she couldn't tell what he was thinking. Yi Li could only helplessly give up. Wasn't it a happy thing to have a man who wasn't hateful and was her future husband giving her jewelry to curry favor with her? Fenghua Building was a very famous jewelry store in the capital. Most of the jewelry they sold was jade. The reason why it was loved by the noble ladies of the capital wasn't just because of its high price and exquisite products. More importantly, the jewelry sold here was never the same. Every style was unique. This made the noble ladies who didn't like the same things as others particularly fond of this store. Yi Li had once considered going down the same high-end route in Hidden Treasure Pavilion, but unfortunately Hidden Treasure Pavilion didn't have a very outstanding designer and sculptor. Yi Li herself only had a smattering of knowledge about the so-called jewelry design, so she could only helplessly give up. After entering Fenghua Building, the shopkeeper immediately came up to greet them. Even when he saw Mo Xiaoyao in a wheelchair, he was only momentarily stunned. Then he revealed a polite smile and greeted them. "So it's Prince Ding and Yisan Xiaojie. Your presence at Fenghua Building brings light to our humble store." Prince Yi Xiaojia, please come in. Chapter 72. Ushering the two in, there was immediately a young girl with delicate features who served fragrant tea for the spring. Yili smiled slightly as she drank the tea. She examined the elegant and comfortable decorations in the room and couldn't help but sigh. This was truly the luxury of a distinguished guest. No wonder Fenghua Tower was the favorite place for the nobles in Jing to visit. Just because of this attentive service, they were afraid they wouldn't be able to earn the customers' money? Perhaps because of Mo Xiuyao's status, the shopkeeper personally stood in front of them to serve them. Does Prince want to choose accessories for Yi San Xiaojia? This seems to be Yi San Xiaojia's first time visiting this little shop. What kind of accessories do you like? Yili looked at Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao drank the tea and said in a light voice, "First pick a few good ones and bring them over for me to see." The shopkeeper made a sound of acknowledgement and turned to personally pick up the items. Yili asked in confusion, "We're really here to buy accessories?" Mo Xiuyao smiled and said, "Li, you're thinking too much. Since we're out here, what's wrong with buying a few pieces that you like?" Yili asked suspiciously, "Is my usual appearance embarrassing you?" Thinking about it, it wasn't impossible. Yili's jewelry wasn't little. It had all been left behind by Sushir when she was alive. However, Yili didn't like being burdened, so her appearance, especially her hair accessories, was maintained at a level that wouldn't be disrespectful. She couldn't accept being dressed extravagantly. With the status of the Ding Wang Fu, if the future Wang Fei dressed too plainly, it was possible that she would feel embarrassed. Mo Xiuyao helplessly shook his head. He looked seriously at Yili and said, "If you really have a head full of pearls, then I won't be able to stand it. In reality, I didn't know where to go, so I brought you here to see." Feng Jiao said that the jewelry here isn't bad. Yili looked suspiciously at him, trying to find a trace of discomfort on his face. However, a certain person was too calm. Even if he said such innocent words, he was still elegantly and calmly reading an ancient book in the study. Yili could only tell herself that she was overthinking things. Thinking about it, although a certain someone now looked like a gentle and refined gentleman, it was said that in the past, there were times when he was young and frivolous, when he rode a horse on a slanted bridge, and when he was full of women. Soon the shopkeeper returned with 2 boxes. Placing it on the table, he carefully opened it and said, "It's rare for Prince and third young Mistress Yi to visit this small shop. This set of jewelry is our boss's latest design and personally made. And I'm afraid this is the only one this year. What do you think, Miss Yi?" Hearing the shopkeeper speak so seriously, Yili also became a little curious. This was a set of top-grade sapphire jewelry. Sapphire wasn't the most valuable jade artifact, but the quality of this set of jewelry was something that Xin Deshuan and Yili had never seen in the pavilion of treasures that were better than this. More importantly, the simple yet elegant design was like an elegant magnolia flower quietly blooming in the moonlit night, making people feel a sense of tranquility and gentleness from the bottom of their hearts. There was no woman in this world that could escape the temptation of exquisite jewelry. Yili sighed in her heart. This set of jewelry consists of 2 magnolia hairpins, a bracelet, and this headpiece. The shopkeeper saw Yili's admiring gaze and immediately opened the other box to show the headpiece inside. The light green jade did not have any complicated patterns or gemstones inlaid. It was just an ornament made of beautiful orchids quietly lying in the silk brocade box, releasing a faint brilliance. "Do you like it?" Mo Xiuyao looked at Yili and said with a smile, "It suits Miss Li very well. It really is very beautiful." Yili nodded. "Just this one. Come back to my residence to get the banknotes." Seeing that the two were very satisfied, the shopkeeper who had made a big deal was also very happy. "Yes, Miss Yi, do you want to take it away or do we have to send it over?" Mo Xiuyao lightly said, "Just send it directly to the Yi residence." Greetings to the 2 princesses. Yili and Mo Xiuyao were accompanied by the shopkeeper as they walked out of the inner room. They heard the waiter at the door respectfully greet them. The shopkeeper was stunned and quickly apologized to the 2 of them, then went forward to greet them. The person who had just come in also saw the 2 of them. The Zhaoyang eldest princess was stunned and involuntarily said, "Xiuyao?" She quickly walked over and stopped a few steps away from Mo Xiuyao. She softly said, "Xiuyao, are you accompanying Miss Yi to buy things?" Mo Xiuyao's eyes slightly moved. He nodded and said, "Yes, eldest princess, We haven't seen each other in many years. Xiaoyang Princess' face had a trace of sadness as she nodded and said, we really haven't seen each other in many years. You're now. Well, when you get married, if Miss Yi has nothing to do, why don't you come to the princess residence and accompany this old woman? Yi Li gently nodded and said with a faint smile, thanks to the eldest princess love, I'll definitely come and disturb you when the time comes. Xiaoyang Princess lightly sighed. She pulled Yi Li and said with a smile, although this is only the second time I've seen Miss Yi, your mother and I had some friendship when we were young. Miss Yi, see if there's anything else you like. Consider it a meeting gift from your elder. Yi Li was somewhat helpless. Just as she was about to refuse, Mo Xiaoyao spoke first, Xiaoyang aunt. Don't scare Yi Li. We still have some matters to attend to, so we'll leave first. Aren't you with Xiaoran Princess? Don't spoil the princess mood. The beautiful woman who had been ignored to the side was the Xiaoran Princess that she had seen at Mo Jingli's wedding banquet a few days ago. Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, she only gave a faint snort. Xiaoyang Princess wrinkled her brows and could only sigh, it's fine. If Miss Yi has any matters in the future, just send someone to my residence to tell me. Yi Li softly thanked her and accompanied Mo Xiaoyao out of Fenghua building. Getting on the carriage, Yi Li could clearly feel that Mo Xiaoyao's mood wasn't very calm. She didn't say much and casually picked up a book from the carriage to read. But thinking back to the Xiaoyang eldest princess's words and expression in the shop, she felt an inexplicable strangeness. She felt that the eldest princess's attitude was a bit similar to Han Mingyue's. It seemed like she wanted to get close to Mo Xiaoyao, but for some unknown reason she could only maintain a certain distance. There was a faint sense of guilt and a desire to make it up to him. And this kind of compensation was clearly not something that Mo Xiaoyao was willing to accept, so they put it on her. For example, Han Mingyue's attitude towards the banknotes and the Xiaoyang princess's attitude. What did these two people do to wrong Mo Xiaoyao? Sorry, Li. In the carriage, Mo Xiaoyao softly said with a faint trace of guilt in his eyes. Yi Li raised her brows in confusion. Mo Xiaoyao helplessly smiled and said, I originally wanted to take you out to relax. Yi Li suddenly realized. This man was apologizing to her for being in a bad mood just now? But this kind of bad mood when meeting someone you didn't like was unavoidable. Or was it because she was acting like an unreasonable little girl that he felt that he needed to apologize? It's nothing, you're not in the mood today. Let's go back first. We'll come out another day when you're in a good mood. In reality, she wasn't in the mood to go shopping with a depressed man. She didn't know how to comfort people. If she had that free time, she might as well do something else. After yesterday's matter, she found that she still had a lot of things to do. Chapter 73. Mo Xiaoyao was silent for a moment and then nodded, I'll send you back. Yi Li nodded and gave an order to Ajin, who was driving the carriage outside. The carriage headed towards the minister's manor. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li's calm and relaxed expression, and his expression softened a lot. He couldn't help but smile. Li doesn't seem to be worried at all. Yi Li shrugged and said, there was nothing to worry about in the first place. But I'm guessing that the matriarch at home is very worried. If the Ding King's manor broke off the engagement, the matriarch would probably want to send her to a nunnery to cultivate. Not only would this ruin the Yi family's reputation, it would also cause them to lose the large amount of betrothal gifts from the Prince Ding mansion. It would be enough for the matriarch and Wang Shi to feel distressed for a long time. Nothing will happen. At most in 1 or 2 days this matter will be over. Yi Li nodded and didn't say anything else. If something really happened to her last night, what would happen? Yi Li didn't ask this question and Mo Xiaoyao also didn't mention it. They both had a tacit understanding. Perhaps even if something really happened, Mo Xiaoyao would still cover it up and marry her. Perhaps he would kill Han Mingyue. Perhaps Yi Li would kill Han Mingyue herself, but she wouldn't marry him. Who was the mastermind behind the scenes? Mo Xiaoyao didn't plan on telling her, and she also didn't plan on asking. They were prepared to spend the rest of their lives together, but they didn't plan on treating each other as their most important person. Just like how Yi Li would never think that Mo Xiaoyao was more important than her family, in Mo Xiaoyao's heart, there was someone more important than her. At the Yi Manor's entrance, Mo Xiaoyao personally saw Yi Li walk in. Only then did he put down the curtain and say to Ajin, let's go back. Ajin silently looked at the slowly closing door and hesitated before asking in a low voice, Prince, why didn't you tell Miss Yi? Jean, let's go back. Yes, Prince. Yi Li had just entered the door when Qing Xia and Qing Shuang, who had been waiting at the side, came up to report that their uncle had come and was waiting to see their young miss. Yi Li was puzzled. Is it eldest uncle or second uncle? He had just returned from the Su family this morning. Did something happen again? Qing Shuang said, the two granduncles are here. She's talking to the old lady in Rongla Hall. Yi Li helplessly looked at her clothes and said, forget it, let's just go over. When he entered the Rongla Hall, he saw his two uncles sitting and drinking tea. The old Madame Minister Yi and Madame Wang all sat on the side with a strange look on their faces. Seeing Yi Li enter, old Madame Yi let out a sigh of relief. She smiled at Yi Li and said, Lear, the two uncles specially came to visit you. Why did you run out? Why haven't you come over to greet them? Yi Li obeyed and went forward to greet them. Su Hongyu waved his hand and said, forget it, Lear just came back from the Su family today. There's no special visit. Su Hongyan also nodded with a sullen face and said, that's right. Eldest brother and I had something to tell Lear yesterday, so we took her over. We didn't expect that she would cause so much trouble. It's our Su family that didn't think it through. Old Madame Yi and Minister Yi looked at each other awkwardly. Although Su Hongyan said that it was the Su family's fault, how could they not hear the blame for the Yi family? After the rumor spread, the Yi family did nothing. They even sent someone to the Su family to ask about it. How could the Su family not feel bitterly disappointed? But old Madame Yi looked at the slim and graceful young girl in front of her and still couldn't make up her mind. She really couldn't tell whether Yi Li really went to the Su family yesterday or was kidnapped by bandits like the rumor said. If something really happened to him, then... Su Hongyan looked at old Madame Yi and Minister Yi and snorted in dissatisfaction. Su Hongyu, who was beside him, glanced at him and smiled at Yi Li. Didn't you say that Lear went out with Miss Hua and Miss Qin? When Uncle came over, I heard that the two young ladies from the Qin family and Hua family were dragged by General Murong's daughter to cause trouble for second young Master Leng. Could it be that Lear also went to cause trouble? Yi Li didn't expect Murong Ting to cause such a ruckus. She quickly shook her head and said, Lear and Prince Ding went to Fenghua building and met Zhaoyong eldest princess and Zhaoran eldest princess. Then they came back. It's Lear's fault for making Uncle wait for so long. Went to Fenghua building with Prince Ding? It's okay. It's not a bad thing for young people to walk around. Su Hongyu was obviously very satisfied with Yi Li's answer. Su Hongyan also nodded and casually complained, your aunt often reminds Qingzi to accompany Miss Qin to go out for a walk. That kid just has to be a blockhead. It's as if saying half a word more will make him suffer. Yi Li thought of Su Qingzi's cold expression and couldn't help but smile. Xing Er was obviously the most gentle and pleasant one among them, but she had a cold and serious fiancé. They had been in the capital for so long. It seemed that other than the time when second aunt sent a gift to the Qin family, the two hadn't officially met. Without looking at Minister Yi and old Madame Ye's changing expressions, Su Hongyu directly turned to Minister Yi and said, I have something to tell Lear alone. I don't know. Minister Yi had always been afraid of this brother-in-law. He didn't dare to say no. He quickly said, then Lear will take eldest brother and second brother to your courtyard to sit. Later brother will prepare a banquet. Two brothers, please come. Su Hongyan got up and said indifferently, eldest brother has an appointment with old Su to play a few rounds tonight. There's no need for a banquet. Seeing Su Hongyu's indifferent expression, Minister Yi had to give up and let Yi Li invite the two uncles to talk in private. Old Madame Yi looked at her son's useless appearance and glared at him with dissatisfaction. Unfortunately, the current patriarch of the Su family had too much power and had to give up. Returning to Qing Yixian, Su Hongyan looked at the decorations inside and outside. He nodded with satisfaction and turned to go out, leaving the room for his eldest brother and niece to talk. Eldest uncle and second uncle came specially. Do you have something important to tell Lear? Yi Li asked Su Hongyu to sit down and personally poured tea while asking. Su Hongyu looked at her and smiled. It seems that Lear's complexion is good. You're not affected by those rumors. Is that so? Yi Li served tea and just sat down. She smiled helplessly and said, rumors are everywhere. We have to live. What's more, the situation now is much better than what we originally thought. Su Hongyu looked at her seriously and said, then if the situation is worse than what you originally thought, what will you do? Being able to escape unscathed last night was indeed very lucky. But if something really happened, Lear, have you thought about it? Yili silently looked at the clear tea in front of her and nodded. Lear has made Uncle worry. But, no matter what happens, I still have to live. Lear may not be afraid of death, but as long as there is hope, I will definitely live. At least I won't die because of the rumors. Speaking to her, Yili couldn't help but bite the corner of her lips. Even in the Dechu state where the customs were still open, a woman's chastity was still far more important than life. She didn't know if her eldest uncle could accept her words, but these were her heartfelt words. Yili definitely wouldn't give up her life for a mistake that didn't belong to her. Chapter 74. Very good, this is the daughter of my Su family. After a long time, Su Hongyu put down his teacup and said calmly. Yili was startled and quickly raised her head to look at eldest uncle. Su Hongyu looked at Yili with a trace of sadness in his eyes. Although the men of the Su family have always been scholarly, they have always been strong enough. No amount of suffering is enough to make us give up what belongs to us. However, the daughters of the Su family are indeed intelligent, but they are also more fragile than normal women. Just like your mother, if Xiaomei had been as strong as you, how could she have ended up like this? Eldest uncle. Every time her mother was mentioned, eldest uncle would be very sad. Yili thought of her weak and beautiful mother in her memories and couldn't help but sigh. When her mother was young, she had been protected too well by the Su family, so she couldn't accept the reality of marriage. She could only slowly wither away in the Yi family's courtyard. Su Hongyu waved his hand. Prince Ding is a very outstanding man. Even now I still think so. However, no matter how you look at it, he is not a good choice for a husband. Lear, do you know why the Su family didn't object to this marriage? Yili looked at eldest uncle's gentle but slightly dignified gaze. She hesitated and said, the emperor's order is difficult? That can be considered one reason. Su Hongyu said, but if the Su family really isn't willing, it's not like there's no solution. Your maternal grandfather still has some face. If your maternal grandfather personally goes to the capital to ask the emperor to retract the order, the emperor won't refuse. Yili was shocked and quickly said, absolutely not. Maternal grandfather is already old and has finally left the turmoil of the capital. How could he get involved in it for Lear? Not to mention other things, her maternal grandfather was already over 70 years old this year. Yili couldn't accept having the old man travel all the way to the capital. A trace of relief flashed across Su Hongyu's face. He reached out to pat Yili and said, your maternal grandfather knows that Lear is a filial child. Yili lowered her head and thought for a while. She frowned in confusion and said, Lear really can't think of it. Uncle, please enlighten me. Su Hongyu sighed and said, because of your identity, if your surname is Su, the Su family can legitimately refuse the emperor's betrothal for you. She could even marry into an ordinary scholarly family in Bingzhou. The Su family didn't need more glory and wealth. However, your surname is Yi. Other than the imperial family, there is also the Yi family that can decide your marriage. Moreover, you were previously married to the late emperor. Although His Majesty annulled the engagement between you and Prince Li, he betrothed Yi Ying to Prince Li. Yi Ying is said to be the daughter of the first wife of the Yi family, but in fact she is just the daughter of a concubine. The emperor wants to put your father in an important position and dotes on Yi Jiaoyi. If you want to satisfy the world's elites, then you can't marry worse than Yi Ying. In other words, if you don't marry Prince Ding, then you will still be betrothed to other princes, or even enter the palace as a concubine. There is no need to consider entering the palace. Uncle and your grandfather have considered all the unmarried princes and can only choose Prince Ding. Yili nodded in agreement with her uncle's words. Actually, Prince Ding is much better than Li Er originally expected. Although now I realize, it might be more troublesome than originally thought. But it's not impossible to accept, right? Uncle also said that Prince Ding is an excellent man. Su Hongyu looked at Yili strangely and said, Lear, what did you think Prince Ding was like? Yili smiled with some embarrassment and said, isn't there a rumor outside that Prince Ding is disabled and disfigured? Is he seriously ill? Anyone could imagine what such a tragic person would look like. So the current Emo Xiuyao was already unexpectedly good. Su Hongyu obviously could imagine it too. She glared at her unhappily and said, if that's really the case, then you might as well think of a way to poison him. Even if you can't marry for the rest of your life, it's still better than marrying a cripple. Yili didn't care if she would marry a cripple or not. In any case, with the family background of the Prince Ding mansion, it was impossible for her to personally serve Mo Xiuyao. She would just treat it as spending the rest of her life with him. He wasn't that crippled now, but there were more troubles than expected. Yili could already foresee that her life after marriage would not be as good as she imagined it to be if her uncle was worried and personally came to tell her these things. Only when your brother mentioned it last night did I notice that the Yi family is simply a bunch of bastards these years. And you, after staying in the capital for so many years, you don't even know the slightest bit about the people in the capital. Su Hongyu glanced at Yili unhappily. Yili hurriedly lowered her head to reflect on her mistake. It wasn't just her father who was afraid of her uncle. She was afraid of him too. In reality, other than her brother, she had never seen anyone who wasn't afraid of her uncle. Perhaps Mo Xiuyao could be counted as one. Her uncle's scolding was right. These years she hadn't stepped out of the house. It was true that she had deliberately separated herself from her surroundings. Of course, Madame Wang had played a part in this, but the main responsibility still lay with her. Even though she had long accepted her current life, Yili still felt that her previous life was real in the depths of her heart. Her current life was more like a game or a dream. Of course, last night's risk made her feel a bit more real. How much do you know about the things that Hongyan gave you before? Su Hongyu asked directly. Yili knew that her uncle was only referring to the information that her second uncle had given her regarding the relationships and important people in the capital. She hurriedly said, I memorized it all. Su Hongyu shook his head. There's no point in memorizing that kind of thing. You have to understand the relationships within. You know everyone in the Duqua household. You've also met noble consort Lu in the palace. Can you tell me what you think of the relationship between the current empress and noble consort Lu, the Duqua household and the Lu household? Yili was astonished. Wasn't this going too far? However, she still seriously considered Su Hongyu's words. After a long time she said, Li has never met the empress. However, I am quite familiar with the people in the Hua household. I have also met Princess Changel once. The empress is the current first wife. Although she is not favored, she should be a magnanimous and virtuous woman. As for noble consort Lu, she is somewhat arrogant and has a cold temperament. However, the emperor dotes on her very much and has 2 sons and 1 daughter. Therefore, the relationship between these two shouldn't be very harmonious. However, I haven't heard of any disagreements between the Hua and Lu families. Prime Minister Lu and Minister Yi disliked each other in court. At present they could be considered evenly matched. However, the situation in the palace clearly showed that noble consort Lu was superior. Su Hongyu nodded, reminding her, that's correct. However, people's hearts are fickle. In particular, the hearts of those in the palace are even more difficult to fathom. In this aspect you still need to put in more effort. It seems that Hongyu has only given you the current information. He probably thinks that you know everything from the early years. Yili was somewhat ashamed. A few years ago, especially when Mo Xiuyao's accident happened to be when her memories were in chaos and her body was weak. After she recovered, she rarely paid attention to the outside world. She truly did not know about those old matters. Second uncle probably did not expect that she would not even know about those matters that caused such a stir. How much does Li know about the Ding household? Yili understood that her eldest uncle had specially come over to teach her the basics. The first master of the Ding household was Mo Lanyun, the younger brother of the founding emperor of the Dechu state, Mo Qingtian. At the founding of the state, the founding emperor conferred upon him the title of Prince Ding, a hereditary prince. It was passed down for 3 generations. During the reign of the late emperor, the powerful officials bullied the young Prince Ding. At that time, Mo Lufang returned to the capital from the border and killed the powerful officials to support the young prince. He was then conferred the title of regent prince. When the late emperor was 16 years old, Mo Lufang returned to the throne. When the late emperor was 29 years old, Mo Lufang passed away due to illness. His eldest son Mo Xiuwen inherited the title. The following year the late emperor passed away. In the current 3rd year Mo Xiuwen was ordered to go to war. During the journey he passed away due to illness and had no children. At the age of 18 Mo Xiuyao inherited the title and led the troops to war. He was ambushed and lost his soldiers. He almost died on the battlefield. Although he managed to turn defeat into victory, he also paid a heavy price. 3 months later, Mo Xiuyao's fiancé passed away due to illness. From then on, the Ding household could be said to have completely disappeared from the capital.